Superman's journey through the worlds. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51, Killing Spree. Lincoln gave the Council of Elders a deadline of 3 days, but the Council of Elders did not even give Lincoln 3 seconds. The moment the mission was issued, the Continental Hotel changed from its original neutral state to a killer service organization that was strongly hostile to Lincoln. It was at this moment that Lincoln knew that those high and mighty bigwigs had made their own choices. What a pity. Pushing open the door, the carpeted corridor was already full of fully armed gunmen. The moment they saw Lincoln's figure appear, they pulled the trigger without hesitation. Da-da-da-da, the hammer kept igniting the primer of the bullet, and the yellow bullets blocked the entire corridor like a dense rain without any room for dodging. It's just a toy. Lincoln's face was indifferent, with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Without dodging, he walked towards the sniper troops who were shooting crazily. Ding 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 ding. The hard bullets hit Lincoln from all angles, but it was like hitting an impenetrable steel plate. Dense sparks kept splashing, and countless bullets were ejected and turned into stray bullets. Seeing Lincoln approaching step by step like a natural descendant, the gunmen couldn't help but feel terrified. They began to retreat, but they could never keep up with Lincoln's speed. Bang! The muffled sound of the barrel bursting sounded in his ears. Lincoln blew away the smoke rising from his chest, reached out and grabbed the gunman's head with fear in his eyes, and then slammed it heavily against the wall. Bang! There was another explosion, and the carpeted wall were stained red with blood. Letting go of the corpse whose head had been completely flattened, Lincoln turned his head and looked at the remaining gunman again. Next, it's your turn. Kill him. Kill him. Looking at the headless corpse lying on the ground, the screams of fear echoed in the corridor, and the gunshots became more and more rapid, but this could not stop Lincoln's steps at all. Bang! Skulls exploded. Puff! Chests burst open. Lincoln's steps were firm and inhuman, and behind him were bodies that were crushed and torn apart by him in a barbaric way. The incomparable bloodiness greatly stimulated the vision and nerves of the gunmen, and their spirits suffered unprecedented oppression until a palm was pressed on their faces, mercifully ending their anxious lives. From the door to the stairs, a short distance of more than 10 meters, there were dozens of corpses left. When Lincoln came downstairs, it was no longer ordinary gunmen who were waiting for him, but a special operations team holding a rocket launcher. The screams from upstairs did not shake the will of this special operations team at all. The moment they saw Lincoln's voice, the captain decisively gave the order, fire. The rocket with a bright tail flame whizzed out and hit Lincoln straight on without dodging. Smoke and flames exploded at the entrance of the corridor with a roar, blocking everyone's vision. The last moment they could see was Lincoln letting the flames of the rocket launcher engulf him without dodging. The dust raised by the shockwave made the entire hall dark, but in the rising dust, everyone could clearly see a figure pushing away the dust and mist and walking out. You dare to stop me at this level? Lincoln's voice was low, like a death knell in everyone's heart. The team member closest to Lincoln subconsciously wanted to fight back, but only saw a fist shadow flashing. The next moment, he turned into a blood mist and exploded. Whoosh 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 bang. Lincoln's body moved rapidly in the room. After releasing the suppression of the biological force field, the powerful sonic boom instantly tore everything it touched into pieces. After a few breaths, Lincoln pushed open the dilapidated door and walked out. Behind him, the hotel lobby was already in a mess, with blood and flesh mixed with dust graffiti everywhere, and no living person was seen. The BO force field made Lincoln clean, but looking at the dilapidated hotel behind him, and the scattered corpses in it, no one would think that Lincoln was as clean as he appeared. On the street outside the Continental Hotel, many killers had gathered to respond to the killing order and hunt Lincoln, but when they saw Lincoln walking out of the hotel, no one dared to move. Lincoln's mouth curled up a smile, and his eyes swept over the killers. Are you here to kill me too? Facing Lincoln's half smile, the killers hurriedly shook their heads, saying that they were just passers-by who stopped just to watch the excitement, and the guns in their hands were also bought by the gun store on the road. They just happened to stop here, and there was no other intention. Lincoln knew that what they said was not true, but it was meaningless to target these unorganized killers. He wanted to target the organized forces under the Continental Hotel and the forces formed by the Council of Elders of the High Table. These scattered soldiers were not worth his effort. New York, Brooklyn, Textile Factory number 17. As the actual controller of the Brotherhood, Sloan gained the support of Hydra by selling the holy relics and his unique arc ballistics, and became a member of the 12 seats of the High Table. It is not entirely true that becoming a member of the High Table has brought benefits to the Brotherhood, but it is undeniable that Sloan himself has gained a lot of benefits from it. But now, the time has come for him to pay the price marked by fate. The destruction of the Continental Hotel in New York City made Sloan realize that things had reached an irreversible point. He summoned all the assassins in the Brotherhood and prepared to wait for Lincoln to appear. He looked calmly at the only exit and entrance of Textile Factory number 17, but as a sonic boom sounded above his head, the expression on Sloan's face suddenly stiffened. His neck was like a rusty gear, and he looked up with difficulty and obscurity. Even at a considerable distance, Sloan could still clearly recognize that the figure with a fluttering cloak behind him, who could hang in the air without any external objects, was his target. Sloan stared at Lincoln's figure until he saw a red glow in Lincoln's eyes. Then he said lightly, "Holy shit, hiss." The red beam fell from the sky like a satellite attack, and in just a moment, Sloan's figure was evaporated. The beam continued to hit the main building structure of the textile factory. The next moment, the building began to melt and collapse, burying one figure after another in the ruins. With supervision and thermal vision, it only took Lincoln a few breaths to wipe out all the living things in the number 17 textile factory. Houses collapsed, limbs were cut, and this base, that Sloan had spent a long time to build, was completely annihilated in an instant under Lincoln's dimensionality reduction attack. Leaving behind a pile of ruins, Lincoln's figure slightly raised, and then tore out a roaring sonic boom, and left in the distance. Chapter 52 Yamaguchi Gumi. Sloan thought that the Brotherhood, which had been passed down for many years, and had unique means, would be able to compete with Lincoln, but the result was that in less than a minute, the Brotherhood was wiped out from history. There was no living thing in the number 17 textile factory. Even the shadow hiding in the sewer was not spared, and was boiled to death by the boiling sewage of the thermal vision. A moment later, the New York police arrived late. They dug through the ruins, and looked at the miserable corpses buried under the ruins, all of them silent. Through the bloody faces, they barely recognized the identities of some assassins. Either they were super killers with multiple wanted orders, or they were well-known philanthropists, or they were special consultants registered in the police station. But now, these famous people are all dead in this ruin, and even their bodies were cut in half, leaving no complete body. In the sky, the strong sonic boom caused by Lincoln's supersonic movement sounded like a piercing air defense alarm. Wherever Lincoln passed, the residents of the city could not help but look up to the sky. Seeing the figure flying away with white clouds in an instant, they showed a trace of confusion in their eyes. Is that a person? Maybe Rome, Italy. This is an ancient city, and it is also the city where the Anthony family, a member of the High Table, is located. With blood as the bond, all members of the Anthony family live in a huge manor community in the suburbs of Rome. This is the private territory of the Anthony family. In an ancient castle building in the manor complex, Anthony looked at the Continental Hotel's hunting order for Lincoln with a smile on his face in his personal study. He could not issue a hunting order of this level, but the decision made by the Council of Elders was exactly what he wanted. Looking at the reward behind the hunting order, which even made him feel a little emotional, Anthony could not help but snorted coldly. A man is innocent, but guilty of holding a treasure. When you take out the token, you are already dead. As he said, he closed the web page on the computer, pushed away the chair, stood up and walked out, but just after he stood up, his movements froze. Looking at the familiar face, Anthony suddenly felt a little terrified, as if he had seen a ghost. Shouldn't you be in New York? How did you get in? It's simple, I walked in, Lincoln said, pulling Anthony's chair and sitting down, and then looked at Anthony lightly. I'll give you one day. Only 13 people in your entire family can survive, and you have to live on your knees. If you don't agree, then you'll die. Unlike Sloane's Brotherhood, which specializes in assassination, Anthony's family has a huge network of power in Italy, which means that they are valuable. At least when Lincoln wants an Italian woman in the future, Anthony will do things faster and better than everyone else. The value of Anthony's family made Lincoln have a little compassion for them, but this compassion was a naked humiliation for Anthony himself. When people live longer and have a higher status, it is not easy to kneel down, and Anthony is like this. But looking at Lincoln, he seemed to know what the consequences would be if he refused. Anthony couldn't imagine how Lincoln could come to Italy from New York in just a few minutes. Lincoln didn't intend to say a word to Anthony, but just looked at him quietly. Under this calm gaze, Anthony's body gradually trembled. He was struggling in his heart, so much so that the blood in his body rushed to his face. Finally, his knees bent down. Boom. After a muffled sound, the patriarch of the family who had been in charge of the Italian mafia for who knows how long knelt in front of Lincoln, his face twitching. I will do as you say. That's good. Lincoln nodded, stroking Anthony's body like stroking a dog, and said in a calm tone, remember, I only want 13 dogs named Anthony. If there is one more, I will use him to make soup for you. Lincoln's voice was high and mighty, like a god looking down from the clouds. The disdain and contempt revealed in it made Anthony clench his teeth, but in the face of such huge pressure, he didn't even dare to move. 1 minute, 2 minutes, the room was silent for a long time, until a burst of cold air blew past, and Anthony raised his head slightly. The doors and windows were still closed, as if they had never been opened, but Lincoln's figure had disappeared like a ghost. If it weren't for the cold pain on his knees, Anthony would have thought that everything before was just an illusion. Lincoln left, but the indifferent voice lingered in Anthony's heart like a ghost. Obey or betray. This is a choice about life and death. Anthony's mind was a little trance. He walked out of the study and walked through the corridor. In the hall, he saw his people, a group of people who were happy. Among them were his wife, his children, his brothers and others. But there were too many people. Too many. Anthony's heart was bleeding, and his palm with dry skin picked up the phone and called his capable subordinate. Bring your people and come to the manor. Anthony has made many choices in his life, many of which were wrong, but this time, unlike other members of the high table, he made the right choice. On the other side, after leaving Anthony's family, Lincoln's figure soon appeared on the other side of the earth. Yamagachigumi. Looking at the iconic words, Lincoln couldn't help but sigh. I've only heard of it in novels, but this is the first time I've seen it. Inside the hall, the current chairman of the Yamagachigumi looked very unhappy when he saw Lincoln suddenly appearing and commenting on his own brand, because he had just seen Lincoln's appearance not long ago. What are you going to do? With no weapons around him, he could only hold the samurai sword that was originally used for decoration tightly. Get out of my house. TSK. Lincoln's eyes slowly moved to the chairman of the Yamagachigumi and shook his head slightly. Seeing you like this, I suddenly don't want to talk to you. Compared to that, according to the spirit of your samurai sword, you will commit suicide when you are insulted, right? In this case, I won't talk to you. Chairman? He looked at Lincoln nervously and puzzledly, not understanding what Lincoln was talking about at all, until 2 red spots came into his eyes, and the expression on his face became panic. You hiss. Chapter 53, Broken Back Dog. The red thermal vision swept across. In order to help the Yamagachigumi's chairman show the fearless spirit of Bushido, Lincoln controlled the temperature and power of the thermal vision to an extremely low limit. One problem caused by this is that his thermal vision has become a low-profile version of the one used by the motherland. The body of the Yamagachigumi chairman was cut in half in an instant, but the low temperature did not burn and seal his wound. The gushing blood dyed the entire room red. The chairman himself was twitching in pain in the pool of blood, and it took a moment before he finally breathed his last. His heart-wrenching screams echoed in the room, causing the Yamagachigumi members outside to look stern. Amid the noisy shouting, a group of Yamagachigumi members holding various weapons rushed into the hall. At first glance, they saw the president who had already died in a pool of blood. The second thing they saw was Lincoln, who turned around with a smile and a black cape on his face. It's just right. It's delivered to my door. I don't need to look for it. Back here. The leading Yamagata-gumi member raised his gun with a face full of anger and pulled the trigger without hesitation. Da-da-da-da. In just a few seconds, the bullets in a magazine were poured out, but looking at the collapsed and shrunken bullet heads on the ground, and then looking at Lincoln, who was unharmed and even began to shine with red light in his eyes, everyone was stunned. Hiss. The hot line of sight instantly cut across, and another body was cut in half, and the hot blood spurted out, painting the faces of the remaining members red. It was not until the sound of falling that everyone screamed, as if they had just woken up from a dream, and rushed out. Behind him, looking at the group of Yamagata-gumi members who exposed their backs, Lincoln's smile became brighter and brighter, and the hot eyes in his eyes became brighter and brighter. "Give me, all of you, go to hell." The black cloak behind Lincoln fluttered like a flag in the messy airflow, hanging in the air and casting deadly rays below. No figure who fled in a hurry could survive. This was a naked massacre against the Yamagata-gumi, and Lincoln didn't even want to hide his thoughts. One after another, the Yamagata-gumi bases were ruthlessly destroyed, with corpses and blood all over the ground, enough to scare anyone who saw the scene. The sonic boom of supersonic flight was as harsh as an air defense alarm, and beams of light kept falling from the sky. At this moment, they seemed to have returned to decades ago, back to that hot and terrifying summer. Neon government. We must stop him. We must stop him. Looking at the figure with the fluttering cloak behind him on the screen, the Minister of Military Affairs shouted, "We must not let him go on like this. We must unite. Send out all the combat troops to shoot him down. Make him pay for this." The military minister's voice was filled with indignation, but another minister said in a low voice, "In fact, we believe that we have no ability to fight against this man named Lincoln. According to existing materials, his flying speed can reach at least Mach 50, and the speed he is showing now is less than 1/10 of it. If he wants, we have no way to capture his figure, and no weapons can attack him. We can only passively take the beating. Are we going to let him go on like this? I'm afraid that's the only way. This is a shame. This is a shame." The military minister's face flushed. He suddenly stood up and walked out. "I absolutely can't accept it." Everyone was silent. No one went to stop him and watched him walk out the door. The next moment, a red ray fell from the sky, and the body of the military minister exploded like a bomb. Blood splattered. Seeing the figure stepping into the door with a pool of blood on the ground, everyone was terrified. "What are you going to do?" "Shh." Lincoln did not answer, but smiled and looked around, making a gesture to silence them. He did not say a word, but everyone understood what he meant. Looking at the pool of blood on the ground, everyone's face twitched, but finally sat down. Just like that summer decades ago, their bones were broken again, but the difference from before was that this time it was one person who broke their bones, and only one person. Madman. He is a madman. In the office of the Trident building, the headquarters of SHIELD, Pierce was terrified when he saw the video footage sent back from the Neon Branch base, and his heart twitched, as if it was being grasped by an invisible big hand. Lincoln, in front of everyone, slaughtered all the backbone forces of the entire Yamagata-gumi. Even with the ability of Hydra, it would take a while to count how many people Lincoln killed this time. This is something that Pierce, any other snakehead, or even the entire Hydra would not dare to do. But Lincoln did it. Not only did he do it, he even dared to let everyone see it clearly. The reason why Pierce and even Hydra dared to take action against Lincoln before was nothing more than one thought: Lincoln needs to abide by the rules set by human society. But now, this reliance has been shattered. Lincoln used primitive means that were almost like those of a barbarian to tell everyone, as long as he has enough power, he is the rule. For the first time, Pierce felt fear of a person. Before he could calm down again, the picture on the screen suddenly switched again, and it was a broadcast from the Neon government. Appearing on the screen were the Neon Emperor, Prime Minister, and more ministers. They looked calm, and did not seem to be coerced. They held documents and read aloud. "People of Japan, do not panic. The attacks that occurred across the country today were not terrorist attacks, but raids against the Yamagata-gumi led by the cabinet. Superman assisted the cabinet in completing the clearing of the Yamagata-gumi. He is great. He brought peace to Japan." Pierce could no longer hear what was being reported. He only felt his head buzzing, and sat down on the chair with some weakness. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. How could there be such a person in the world who could lie to such an extent? Those ministers, don't they have any sense of shame? Don't they have any backbone? Just surrender like that? It's ridiculous. Looking at the screen, for some reason, Pierce suddenly wanted to laugh. He didn't know what he was laughing at, but he just thought it was ridiculous. In history, those people seemed to look no different from the people now. No, it seemed that the people in front of him might be a little shorter, and a little shorter. It's like a dog with a broken spine. Chapter 54, Fire at the City Gate affects all. Lincoln is not a mad killer. Killing people does not bring him pleasure or fun. It is just a means of doing things. The dark world formed by the Continental Hotel is so huge that it covers the entire world. The 12 seats at the high table plus the 4 elders of the Council of Elders, the number of groups behind them reaches millions or even tens of millions. Kill them all? It is unrealistic. Lincoln is too lazy to spend so much time on these people. Even if he opens a portal to kill them, it will take some time and energy. Since he doesn't want to kill them all, killing the chicken to scare the monkeys is the best means. The question is, who can be more suitable than the Yamagachigumi to be the chicken? To kill the chicken to scare the monkeys? No. Use the blood of the Yamagachigumi and the bones of Neon to build a monument, and everyone else can hear Lincoln's voice, see Lincoln's existence, and respect him very much. Call him Mr. Lin. In the desert, islands, cities, and wilderness, the high-ranking bigwigs looked at the emperor and ministers reading the speech on the screen, and they were all silent. Whether it was the Hashemite family, which radiated a terrifying influence in all directions with the Middle East as its center, or the old man who looked old, but actually controlled a shadow government comparable to Hydra, they all felt trembling from the bottom of their hearts. Lincoln's unsurpassed speed, incredible strength, unbreakable defense, and heat vision that could melt everything made them understand their essence, a fragile human being who would die with a bullet. High status? Amazing power. What's the use? In front of Lincoln, they were just characters who would die with a heat vision. No one would go to war with Lincoln, who could strike the earth from space. The world fell into silence at this moment, and then changed silently. The Neon Network, the video that was originally widely disclosed, began to disappear rapidly at an alarming speed. Taking this as a starting point, all governments around the world took joint action, and reached a tacit understanding in an astonishingly short time, to delete everything about Lincoln on the internet. Dark Web. The dark web is also a network based on servers, and there are traces to follow. In the operation at all costs, no website page or terminal could retain any information about Lincoln, only some fragmentary words remained. Like a half-hidden myth, Lincoln was abstracted from a concrete person to a non-existent god. Stark Industries. As the only individual with super artificial intelligence, Stark's peaceful life was interrupted that day. The CIA, FBI and other national security departments, intelligence departments, and network monitoring departments jointly conducted an investigation and directly entered the Stark Industries building. Tony Stark, we need your assistance with something. I refuse. Tony looked coldly at the investigators in front of him who had broken into his group by force. I will not have any conversation with you until my lawyer arrives. Lawyer. Several agents looked down at the documents in front of them, then looked up and said calmly, if you mean the Lesway law firm that has cooperated with your group, then I can tell you that it has been reorganized, and all contracts related to Stark Industries have been forcibly terminated. The lawyers who have a cooperative relationship with you personally are under investigation, and their lawyer licenses will be suspended until they are sure to get rid of the suspicion of occupational crimes. Tony looked at the agents in front of him, his eyes full of disbelief. How can you do this? This is a contempt of the Constitution. I will definitely report to the congressman and demand a thorough investigation of you. This is your freedom, Mr. Stark. The agent's face remained calm, and he stretched out his hand to push a piece of paper out. If you don't want your cooperation order with the military to be terminated directly, I suggest you sign this document and cooperate with our investigation. For the first time, Tony felt a little unfamiliar with this free country that focuses on economy. This overwhelming dictatorship and power even gave him the illusion that he was in a feudal dynasty. He was angry, but after repeatedly trying, but failing to dial any lawyer's number, he gave in, and reached out to pick up the paper. At a glance, his face was full of disbelief and confusion. Are you kidding me? Just for this? You reorganized a law firm, and took away all my lawyers? Hearing Tony's words, the agents couldn't help but fall silent. They thought that Lincoln's previous incident in Neon had shocked the world, but now it seems that the billionaire in front of them didn't even notice what Lincoln did. Thinking of the rumored daily life of this playboy, the agents were speechless. The experts from the special agency planned everything and were ready to force Tony to do what they wanted, but he was so busy in bed that he didn't know what was happening outside. But this made things much simpler. The agents quietly took the paper from Tony's hand and put another paper signed with the names of the major countries in the world on the table. This is a document jointly signed by the major countries in the world, which aims to recover and destroy a secret document that accidentally leaked from the network. We need to delete the database of your artificial intelligence, Jarvis. If you refuse to cooperate, all the major countries in the world will unite and use all possible means to sanction your company, property, and individuals. Now, please look directly at the camera, don't make any other movements, and let your artificial intelligence clear all the database information starting from September 23, 2009. Remember, it's all. This is impossible. Tony's face suddenly changed. Jarvis's database records all the information of the Stark Group. If it is all cleared, my company will suffer an unbearable blow. The agents' faces did not change, but they said calmly, is it as big as the blow your company suffered from being forced to shut down? In a word, Tony was blocked and speechless. The camera on the table that the agents set up when they entered the door monitored Tony's every move without blind spots, analyzing and calculating his behavior and psychology. All the top talents of the world's people were gathered together for only one purpose, to completely erase Lincoln's existence from the online world. They allow this godlike person to exist, but ordinary people should not know about it, which will seriously undermine the stability of the ruling class. Tony Stark is rich, but he is not yet a member of the ruling class, so he should not know about Lincoln's existence. This is a purge that affects every corner of the world. After this day, people should only remember that there was a huge fluctuation on the internet. Lincoln did it by influencing everyone to stop with his own power. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55. I got scared so quickly that I didn't know what to do. What happened to Tony was just a small microcosm. More similar things happened to more people. The traces left by Lincoln on the internet were being erased quickly. Zora did not stop all this. He just quietly collected and stored all the relevant information, ready to take it out again whenever Lincoln needed it. Hydra did not know that Zora had stabbed him in the back again at this time, or even if they knew, they would not have time to worry about it, because they had more things to worry about. I said a long time ago that he should not be rewarded. In the meeting that was held again, a snakehead shouted loudly, his eyes full of anger and worry. His words immediately attracted the bombardment of other snakeheads. Come on. You didn't even express your opinion last time. No one here made the right choice. Do you want to take Hydra to hell? Enough. What we should do now is how to negotiate with that person. If he wants to attack us, even if we install a nuclear bomb under our buttocks, we can't stop him. The words of the snakehead made everyone fall into silence, and then, no one knew who took the lead. They tacitly looked at Pierce. No one spoke, but the meaning was indeed self-evident. You issued the bounty order for the Continental Hotel, and you are also a member of the Elders Council, so you have to solve the problem. Pierce, facing the eyes of his former colleagues, Pierce's mentality exploded. He trembled and opened the drawer, reached out and took out the quick-acting heart-saving pills that he had just prepared yesterday, and took them down. Pierce's action of taking the medicine did not shake the other snakeheads' ideas. Strucker even said, Mr. Alexander, you have caused a lot of trouble. For the glory and cause of Hydra, we need you to make some small sacrifices. Don't worry, we will remember your contribution and make some compensation. Compensation? Who the hell wants your compensation? Pierce looked ugly and roared loudly in his heart, facing that guy directly may kill people. If you want compensation, go ahead. While let me, an old man in his teens, go. Pierce wanted to refuse, but he knew that he couldn't refuse. As these damn bastards in front of him said, he was in charge of the Continental Hotel, he served in the Presbyterian Church, and he was the first to appear in New York. He had many opportunities to get along well with Lincoln, and even turned a blind eye, but he made the wrong choice every time and finally came to such an embarrassing situation. In fact, Pierce felt that he was wronged. Over the years, there have been so many superhero and supervillain missions, and they are all within a limit. Who would have thought that an over-limit person would suddenly appear? Moreover, this super-standard being actually went to the Continental Hotel to look for women like an ordinary person. Who could have imagined this? Pierce felt that he was extremely wronged and had no words to express his bitterness. Sitwell in the other office was also a little stunned. Not long ago, he received a mission to target Lincoln from his immediate superior. With sufficient motivation brought by the strong pressure, he made a perfect plan, and then he saw the statement issued by the group of Japanese people on his computer. He used the internal search system of S.H.I.E.L.D. to search forward a little, and then he saw a picture that made him horrified. At this moment, he was sure that his immediate superior did not just want him to die, but definitely wanted him to die. Without any hesitation, he reached out and picked up the phone on the table and dialed the number in violation of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s internal confidentiality regulations. Just a few breaths later, with Zora's signal enhancement, Lincoln's voice appeared in the microphone in Sitwell's hand. Hello, who? Hearing Lincoln's voice, Sitwell couldn't help feeling nervous, but he still sorted out his thoughts and said, hello, respected. Are you Sitwell? Lincoln's sudden interruption made Sitwell's thoughts stagnate. After a moment of silence, he became a little uneasy. You, how did you know? Because I saw you. There was a barely detectable golden light in Lincoln's eyes. Following the trajectory of the communication, he saw Sitwell thousands of miles away, and the piece of paper on his desk. Are you planning to deal with me? Let me see. Cooperate with me? Very good idea. Lincoln's voice was calm, but it made Sitwell's hair stand on end. He looked around, as if he had seen a ghost, but he could not see a single person. At this time, Lincoln's voice sounded again. Don't turn your head. I'm in the Middle East, and you can't see me. If you called me just for your plan, then don't continue. No. No. Seeing that Lincoln was about to hang up the phone, Sitwell shouted, I want to talk to you about other things. I can be your spokesperson. Sitwell swallowed his saliva and said nervously, Alexander Pierce wants to kill you, but I don't want to. You can kill him, and let me be your right-hand man. I can help you control the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. In that case, there is no need. Lincoln's voice made Sitwell feel like he was falling into an ice cave. The next moment, Lincoln's words made him feel that the world was absurd. Your boss is also calling me at this time. He should have the same idea as you. Lincoln's words contained so much information that Sitwell was stunned. He didn't even notice that Lincoln had cut off the call. It was not until he heard other voices around him that he woke up from his dream with a strange look on his face. Pierce also called just as Lincoln said. Pierce was indeed calling, and he was not the only one calling. Everyone was eager to contact him, especially those at the high table in the Presbyterian Church. Lincoln did not show up, but just passed the voice to their ears. But even such a contemptuous attitude did not make anyone feel dissatisfied. Before Lincoln proposed the conditions, they took the initiative to give all the conditions that ordinary people could not imagine. If it were not for the negotiable words, if you encounter trouble, please try to contact the local officials and let them impose any punishment you want on the provocateurs. This would almost be an unconditional surrender. Probing a hammer. This is not the Superman who can be appeased by a nuclear bomb hitting his head, who can be provoked and tested at will. The one in front of him is a ruthless person who can even drop a nuclear bomb directly in the city if he disagrees with him. What are you still probing and negotiating? Just surrender directly. As long as you don't want to destroy the world, the worst that can happen is to raise an ancestor. Humans can afford it. They tried to solve all the problems in the shortest time possible and gave a series of incredible conditions. The only problem was that they gave up too quickly. Even the United States, one of the world's most powerful countries, was so easy to talk to. It felt a bit unreal, which made Lincoln, who originally thought he would run into two tough guys, feel a little at a loss. Didn't we say that humans are greedy and ambitious? This is a little different from what I imagined. Thanks to Shufei Nairo for the 100 points reward, and thanks to the book friend 20210617205922422 for the 2000 points reward. Chapter 56, The Superior. The Hashim Family. The family inheritance system doomed Hashim's fate. With the whole family standing on the opposite side, Hashim could only hand over his body to teach everyone a lesson. But not everyone is willing to die calmly, at least Pierce is very unwilling. Great. Speaking of things, Zora. Lincoln glanced at the young girl with very neon characteristics beside him, rubbed her hands, and said, I'm very busy now, so you'd better have a good reason to disturb me, otherwise I don't mind letting you turn off your phone for a while. Someone is trying to deceive you. Zora said hurriedly, I monitored the network of those people. You mercifully chose to let the four elders commit suicide and then launch new superhuman, but some of them are going to try to use cloning technology to deceive you. Cloning technology. Lincoln became interested. Is the current cloning technology advanced to this point? Their cloning technology has many flaws, but if it is just to let the clones die, it is almost perfect. Hearing Zora's words, Lincoln couldn't help but smile. You collect the list and evidence, and then submit it to that Affairs Processing Office, and let them handle it themselves. The Joint Affairs Processing Office, referred to as the Office, is an organization with a very low name, but it is jointly established by organizations of multiple countries, and has dominant power on a global scale. What this firm has to do is very simple. It is to meet all the requirements raised by Lincoln, solve all the problems he encounters, and ensure that Lincoln spends every day happily, instead of thinking about repeating the Yamagachigumi destruction plan. When almost all the power of mankind is gathered to serve one person, the power of this firm is extremely terrifying. After a large amount of evidence was sent to the mailbox of the joint firm by Zala, this organization, which was just established not long ago, showed its powerful ability. Shield. Trident building. Okay, I got it. In the director's office, Fury, who had just been at peace for a while, hung up the phone with a dark face and expressionless face. A moment later, he calmly walked out of his office, walked straight to the outside of the Trident building, and ran into a group of firm members in black clothes. I have temporarily cut off all the surveillance facilities in the Trident building. Fury said as he stretched out his hand and handed over something. This thing will allow you to temporarily obtain the authority of a level 10 agent for half an hour. Is he in there? Yes. Fury nodded. I just went to find him. I'm sure that it must be him. The possibility is more than 80%. As the director of SHIELD, Fury's words are still very reliable. Several people nodded and took the authority key from him and walked into the building. Watching the backs of the group, Fury took a deep breath and did not follow them in. Instead, he found a place to sit outside and reached into his pocket to touch an ordinary old-fashioned BB machine. This was left to him by Captain Marvel many years ago so that he could call Marvel far away in the universe when he encountered something he could not resist. He did want to call Marvel back, but later he gave up because of the successful negotiation and the establishment of the joint firm. This proves that Lincoln is not an enemy who wants to destroy the Earth or destroy mankind. Since he is not an enemy, there is no need to call Marvel back. It's just another person on the head. In human history, there have been so many rulers that it's no big deal to have a new one. The establishment of the agency has become a hub of connection. In Fury's view, everything is bearable and things have not reached the worst. By the way, as the director of SHIELD, he is also a member of the agency. As an organization under the control of the World Security Council, SHIELD has great power, but it has no meaning in front of the agency. Because the director of SHIELD is a member of the agency, those snakeheads are also willing to help the agency, so that Lincoln will not kill casually. So, SHIELD and the snakeheads work together. Pierce in the Trident building had no idea that he was isolated and helpless and was still ambitiously planning the clone death plan. The 4 elders, except Hashim, were unwilling to give up their lives. They knew that they could never fight Lincoln, and human society would never be willing to help them fight Lincoln, so they could only plan to fake their deaths. After that, they could still live their own lives as local tyrants, with almost no difference, except that they could not appear in any public places. Pierce planned well until a group of people opened the door of his office and appeared in front of him. "Alexander Pierce, you are arrested." "No." Pierce looked at the agent in front of him, his eyes full of horror. "You can't do this. In fact, we have dual authorization from the White House and Congress." The agent looked at him calmly. "Alexander Pierce, from today on, you have been stripped of all your positions and prosecuted for crimes against humanity. What awaits you will be the trial of the law." Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Pierce's face was full of madness. "It's just one person. It's just one person, and you guys just wow." Reaching out to cover Pierce's mouth, the leading agent waved his hand with a grim look. "Take him away, lock him up, and wait for his fate." In the underground parking lot of the Trident building, an ordinary car took Pierce away, and in other corners of the world, 2 high-ranking elders were taken away. They possessed terrifying power, but it was useless in front of the firm. The sound of helicopter propellers rang out, and they were handcuffed and chained and taken away from the throne, waiting for Lincoln's disposal. Human physical fitness could not compete with Lincoln. After galloping for a long time, Lincoln let go of the girl who was as soft as water and picked up the phone again. A message was quietly displayed on it. This time, those people wisely did not choose to disturb Lincoln by phone, but informed him of the outcome of the matter by message. It was obvious that the legal trial was completely fake. The real ending was that the 3 elders were captured by the firm from all over the world and detained in a secret prison to await Lincoln's decision. Their death was already doomed. The only difference was how Lincoln planned to let them die. Whether they were executed secretly or publicly, everything depended on Lincoln's wishes. Chapter 57 The Evil Man. Prison inside the firm. Looking at Pierce and the other 2 whose limbs and mouths were sealed, a guard hesitated for a moment and asked his companion hesitantly, "Do you think he will come?" "I don't know." The companion shook his head. "What people of that level are thinking is simply not something people like me can know. Maybe he won't come, and then these 3 guys will probably be executed on the spot. But if that person comes," he paused here and shook his head slightly, "no one knows what will happen." As the 2 were talking, they saw bright sparks bursting out of the air in front of them, and the alarm of high-level energy reaction resounded throughout the prison until Lincoln's figure appeared from it, and the 2 guards cut off the alarm without hesitation. Without any nonsense, they decisively cut off all surveillance in the prison, and then a voice came from the loudspeaker. "Mr. Lin, there are 3 elders who are trying to deceive you. You can deal with them as you please." "Okay, I see." Lincoln looked up at the surveillance facilities in the corner that had stopped working and then turned to look at the 3 terrified elders. He pondered for a moment. 3 people. You guys are just a coincidence. As he said that, he stretched out his hand in the air and opened 2 space doors. From the first space gate, he took out the cosmic cube that exuded azure blue luster, and behind the second space gate was the calm face of Ancient One. "What do you want to do now?" Lincoln smiled and pointed to the table behind Ancient One. "I'll borrow your time stone for a while, and I'll return it to you soon." Ancient One looked back and looked at Lincoln meaningfully. "Those who play with time at will eventually be trapped in time. It doesn't matter, I'm not afraid." Lincoln waved his hand and said casually, "As long as the power is strong enough, any bullshit time loop will be broken with one punch." Lincoln's words made Ancient One's face stiffen for a moment, and then he sighed helplessly, opened the Eye of Agamotto, and handed the time stone to Lincoln. "Remember, return it after use. Don't worry, don't worry." Lincoln smiled and waved his hand, and closed the space gate with a wave of his hand. His actions and tone were casual, as if he was looking for a bottle of soy sauce from his neighbor, but Pierce and the other 2 in front of him were completely stunned. Cosmic Cube. Playing with time. In order to deal with them, it is necessary to have such a thing. Not worth it. It's not worth it. They struggled frantically, whimpering, but they couldn't attract Lincoln's attention. Lincoln held up the cosmic cube, injected his spirit into it, and connected it with the space gem sealed in the hypercube. The light flashed, and the space gem placed in the cosmic cube was taken out. Grabbing the space gem that was emitting a faint glow, Lincoln's eyes moved slightly, and the space in all directions began to twist and change. It was not only the space that changed, but also the matter that was attached to the space and locked in position began to shift. Countless particles moved with the changes in space, gathered into streams, and turned into a glove on Lincoln's hand. Lincoln took off the two gems floating in the air, and with a slight sound, the gem containing the fundamental power of the universe was embedded in the glove. The existence of the Infinity Gauntlet can help Thanos reduce the side effects of using gems and better control gems, but Lincoln doesn't need it. He made this glove just to make it more convenient to use. As for the side effects and control, does he, a Superman, care about these? Using the power of the space gem to disassemble the space and the particles in it for reassembly. Although Lincoln did not have the reality gem, he also achieved an alternative means of creation. Not only that, while controlling the Azure energy to reassemble the materials, a faint green light spread out from Lincoln's other hand. The power of time was divided into 3 strands and acted on Pierce and others. The time that could only flow forward began to reverse. Their white hair began to turn black, and their bodies began to become younger. The only thing that did not change was the brain that was blocked by Lincoln. Using the time gem and the space gem, Lincoln distorted the changes in space and time at will, and everything was under his control. The strange light spread around the room. Feeling the vitality that continued to emerge in their bodies, the still decayed brains of the 3 people had been shocked and lost the ability to think. The ability Lincoln showed to materialize out of thin air and reverse time seemed like a miracle to them, which made them feel dead. They didn't know what Lincoln was going to do, but they knew that it would definitely not be a good thing. Emotions of anxiety, panic, and despair kept wandering in their brains. They even lost the ability to be angry, and only regret was left. Okay, almost done. There was a row of reagents in front of him, and Lincoln gathered the power of the gem. Without any foreplay, he picked up a reagent and injected it into the body of the strong Pierce, controlling the collision of particles to release gamma rays that irradiated Pierce, and Pierce's body began to swell rapidly. Lincoln reproduced the process of the birth of the abomination. The difference was that he also added a little bit of super soldier serum and magic factors. He did not let himself enter that godlike state, but with his current brain and extraordinary intuition, he was enough to solve many problems. Lincoln looked calmly at Pierce's body constantly expanding, watching the bulging muscles tear the prison uniform, break the shackles, and finally turned into a yellow-green giant standing in front of him. Maybe there was some small problem with the formula. Pierce did not die, but the proportion of the upper body being large and the lower body being small was weird, like a character from a comic book. Lincoln was thinking, and suddenly he heard Pierce's figure. Power. Powerful power. I can overturn everything. With a roar to the sky, Pierce rushed towards Lincoln, and the fist as big as a casserole swung down in the air with fierce power. Looking up at the shadow of the fist falling, Lincoln waved his hand, and a beam of light came out, which made Pierce's movements completely solidified, as if the animation was paused. He waved his hand again, and Pierce's body shrank, and rotted like an apple, and finally disappeared completely, as if time had passed on him for tens of millions of years. After doing this step, Lincoln looked at the reagent in his hand, and said to himself, it seems that not only the body proportions are a bit problematic, but also the IQ has been weakened. Seeing Pierce turn from a human into a monster, and then quickly decay into ash, the other 2 were already scared to death. They struggled more frantically, but they could not stop Lincoln from manipulating the steel needle into their bodies like an evil scientist. Chapter 58 Collection Hall. The more fear a person has, the more unimaginable power he or she can unleash. Just like now. Although the 2 elders who were tightly bound by the straitjacket could not break free from the bondage of the special cloth, they could clearly feel the hard steel needles piercing their skin and muscles, injecting the cold liquid into their blood vessels. Tearing pain was born deep in the body, and power seemed to be born from the void. As the intense pain was pumped into the body, their muscles were inflated like balloons. The things used to seal the mouth had long been bitten to pieces in this great change. Looking at Lincoln with fear and despair in their eyes, they use their remaining rationality to issue a final unwilling roar. "Devil. You are a devil." In response to this desperate roar before death, Lincoln's face was calm. "Devil? How can such a weak thing be compared with me? Only the Lord of Hell can do it." Lincoln's indifferent voice came into their ears, and the two finally showed desperate unwillingness in their eyes, and then, complete madness and belligerence occupied their rationality. Roar. The roar of the angry beast set off visible sound waves in the narrow room. With a giant-like body of equal proportion and even more powerful strength, combined with two biological agents and magic, Lincoln created a monster that surpassed the hatred. But the physique and strength exchanged for the brain. Some defects have been made up, but other defects have been magnified. As he said, Lincoln stretched out his hand and wiped it again, and the power of time gushed out, pushing the lifetime of the two monsters to pass rapidly. In a short moment, they turned into a meaningless dust. Lincoln did not turn the time of the three people back and forth for reuse, because if he was not careful, it might really cause a chaotic time loop. Although he was not worried about being trapped in it, there was no need. Anyway, there were plenty of people. Although Lincoln did not achieve what he wanted with the 3 test subjects, he also verified many things. He successfully reproduced the super soldier serum, successfully analyzed and created the Hulk cells born from gamma rays, and successfully completed the combination of the two. Although there were a few small problems, they were not important. The Infinity Gauntlet in his hand disintegrated. Lincoln took the green time stone and threw it into a space gate. "Ancient One, I'll return the stone to you." He pushed another stone together with the cosmic cube, and another portal swallowed up the cosmic cube, which was emitting azure light again. These two things are indeed useful, but there are not 6 of them, so Lincoln has no intention of collecting them for the time being. He opened a portal again, took a step, and appeared in the Manhattan building that Ross promised to give him early in the morning. Lincoln didn't know what the name of this place was originally, but now, this building has been renamed Collection Hall. It's a strange name, but considering that the name open to the public is still the previous Manhattan building, this name that is destined not to be widely known is not so strange. The building has a total of 95 floors. Lincoln plans to open the floors below the 6th floor to the public. From the 7th floor, it will be the real Collection Hall. The decoration work of the Manhattan building is in full swing. Lincoln has opened the portal in advance and came to the 7th floor, which has been fully renovated. There is nothing else here, only huge glass display cabinets and light strips emitting soft white light. The glass display case that naturally attracts people's attention is empty, which is why Lincoln came here. He stretched out his hand to grab the space, and his palm directly penetrated the barrier between the real space and the mirror space. When his palm was retracted, he had already taken a can of blue reagent. Using the space gem, he made a lot of things, such as the super soldier serum in his hand now. The two ends are made of gold titanium alloy, and the transparent material in the middle is a super material that can withstand sniper bullets. Lincoln put a high concentration of super soldier serum in it. Only 1 tube of serum, plus enough energy. Everyone can become Captain America, instead of the incomplete existence of the Winter Soldier. The glass display case is completely sealed and cannot be opened, but as a portal opened, Lincoln penetrated the space and put the blue serum into the display case. The magnetic levitation system was activated, and there was no need for a physical counter. The reagent tube containing the serum was suspended, slightly tilted in it, and slowly rotated. The red beam of light from his eyes swept across the shopkeeper's nameplate. After the high temperature dissipated, a few lines of handwriting appeared on the silver white nameplate. Item: Super Soldier Serum. Source: Marvel World. Function: strengthen the human body to reach the human limit. Putting the Super Soldier Serum that most people in the world desire into the display cabinet, Lincoln did not waste any more time to take a look and turned to another display cabinet. This time, what he took out was no longer a simple serum, but a group of green cells that still had incredible vitality, even if they did not form an actual individual. The birth of Hulk was an extremely low probability event, and the simple gamma rays, or instruments, had no collection value, so Lincoln got a group of original Hulk cells. These cells were synthesized by the space gem, but their structure was no different from the omnipotent cells in Hulk. As long as they were supplied with enough gamma rays and energy substances, this group of cells could continue to grow and become the second Hulk, a Hulk who looked like Banner, but could reshape his way of thinking. Lincoln did not need something like the Hulk, so this group of Hulk omnipotent cells that could keep Ross awake at night was just an exhibit in his hands. Magnetic force could not act directly on the Hulk cell group, so this time a cylindrical container appeared in the display cabinet. The Hulk cell is imprisoned in this container, which provides it with the necessary nutrients to survive, and at the same time, the constant surrounding environment prevents it from differentiating to form new life. Lincoln needs a group of Hulk cells as a collection, so the Hulk cells that appear in the display case can only be a group of Hulk cells without thoughts. This time, Lincoln did not leave immediately, but stood in front of the booth for a while. After watching the entire system start to operate stably, Lincoln turned his eyes to the blank metal nameplate. Hiss. The red rays were used to carve, and then the handwriting appeared. Item: Hulk Almighty Cell. Source: Marvel World. Function: directed induction of differentiation can grow into a second Hulk. The area of the Manhattan building is large enough, and only one floor is enough to accommodate a lot of collections. Lincoln put into exhibits that only occupied a small area. Looking at the remaining area that has not been lit, Lincoln has an ambition. Sooner or later, he will light up the entire building. Chapter 59. I'm not discussing this with you. Each world has unique products, and each special product has unique value, the value of collection. There are many special products in the Marvel world, but this does not mean that Lincoln has to keep running for these special things. In comparison, at present, he feels that it is more important to stabilize his position of having the final say. After all, he does not want to go to other worlds, to play for a long time that day, and come back to find that his home is gone, which is not fun. At this point, Lincoln felt that he had to despise the camouflage wizard who did not make progress. He flipped through the spell book, but did not find any spells related to personal space, which directly shattered his hope of running away with the building. The final result is that he has to use some other spells to combine to prevent others from running into his house to steal things. The hidden magic of the sanctuary is not suitable for him, because he plans to transform the 6 floors downstairs into a place suitable for enjoyment, such as swimming pools, bars, nightclubs and other places. Unless he is willing to spend time to slightly transform the hidden magic, it will be a bit difficult. All the magic powers of camouflage come from the demons outside the domain, and the purpose of its creation is to deal with and resist the demons. There are not many things related to people's livelihood. After putting the 2 exhibits away, Lincoln took the fully transparent elevator to the rooftop. Looking slightly into the distance, he saw the open floors and the display cabinets in them. The renovation of the Manhattan building was not progressing fast, and Lincoln had no intention of helping these people. He came to be an ancestor, not a laborer. If there was anything he was not satisfied with, he could modify it later with the reality gem. As for helping, no. On the rooftop, it was noon, and the sunlight from the sky was hot enough to bring Lincoln a steady stream of power. Sufficiently strong sunlight can speed up the charging speed of the golden string. This was what Lincoln had confirmed before using the cosmic cube, but now, he has also confirmed the second thing, that killing can also speed up the charging speed of the golden string. He thought it was just an illusion, because he had killed many people on the European battlefield, but the change in the charging speed was so small that he could not detect it. He had also killed many people in the Master's world, and there was still no change. Until just now, when he personally dealt with Pierce, he really confirmed this conclusion. Killing plot characters can speed up the charging speed of the golden string. Lincoln could not calculate how much charging power killing a plot character could provide, but killing a Pierce would bring Lincoln a charging power equivalent to several weeks. Bulls's death made Lincoln realize for the first time the impact of killing on the golden string. With the addition of Pierce, the golden string, which was originally grayish-white, suddenly had a golden glow. Although there are still many blank spaces left, it does not affect Lincoln's nature at all. It's just a plot character. There are many plot characters in the Marvel world. For example, "Now sir, we have caught the person you want." A pleasant voice sounded behind him. Lincoln turned around slightly, and in front of him appeared a member of the firm who was responsible for contacting him. The people in the firm knew that he liked women, so the person who was responsible for contacting Lincoln in the Manhattan building was a woman, a perfect woman in the popular sense. Lincoln had no objection to this, because a liar in front of him was really good in terms of work, life, and daily life. In short, she was both capable and capable. After getting Lincoln's consent, Elia nodded gently and turned away. After a while, she reappeared in front of Lincoln. This time, she appeared with a man whose head was swollen and deformed, and whose whole body was out of proportion. Samuel Stern. This name may not be very popular, but if it is replaced by the Big Boss, more people will know it at once. Like Abomination, Samuel is also a non-human created by Hulk's blood. However, it is somewhat different from Abomination. For some reason, the area where Samuel has changed is currently limited to above the neck. That is, the brain volume continues to expand, and the skin changes color. This is a bad thing, because it makes Samuel's already low appearance completely zero, but it is also a good thing. The expanded brain volume and Hulk's blood make Samuel smarter than before. Although the anger factor in Hulk's blood makes him unable to use his brain well at present, he can be deceived in the future. Abomination was sent to Ross's laboratory by Lincoln, and the fate of the Big Boss was no different, but the difference is that he is now brought to Lincoln again. Ross and his men knew clearly the potential of the Big Boss, but facing Lincoln's request, they had no chance of refusing. "Hello, Dr. Samuel Stern." Looking at Samuel, whose head was swollen and green, he chuckled and waved to the agents behind him to remove the restraints on Samuel and leave. The agents of the agency were very efficient. In less than a minute, they left the rooftop with a bunch of scraps, leaving only Samuel and Lincoln, who were full of confusion. After rubbing the uncomfortable part of the restraint, the Big Boss's eyes changed several times, and he looked at Lincoln with some vigilance and doubt. "Do you know me?" "Of course." Lincoln nodded, and pointed at Samuel's head. "This time I came to you to try to make your brain normal." "Restore to normal?" Samuel's expression suddenly turned into rejection and anger, and he stood up suddenly. "No. I won't let anyone touch my head. I'm normal now. My computing power is more expensive than ever before. My thinking and my intelligence are my unique wealth. Don't think of depriving me of what belongs to me." The tyrannical factor from Hulk's blood constantly affects the Big Boss's brain. He is no longer the previous Dr. Samuel, but is constantly changing into an evil scientist. The change in emotions triggered the changes in those special components in his body. His skin color visibly turned into yellow-green, which means that the erosion is deepening, and he himself is unaware of it. "I think you misunderstood, Big Boss." Lincoln took a sip of iced soda, looked up at Big Boss, and showed his iconic charismatic villain smile. "I'm not discussing this with you, and you can't refuse." As he spoke, he stretched out his fingers and drew in the air. The magic condensed into substance and fell down. A golden rope moved all over Big Boss's body, and then tightened instantly. Chapter 60. The bullets are loaded, and will be used. Magic rope, a little gadget Lincoln made in his spare time. The strength of this thing is proportional to the amount of magic it uses. In the hands of ordinary mages, this thing can't even lift their own weight, but in Lincoln's hands, it is a rope to bind immortals. Even Hulk's strength can't break free from Lincoln's chains, let alone a Big Boss with an advantage in IQ. The angry emotions constantly stimulated the nerves of the Big Boss, and the yellow-green color that was originally only distributed on the scalp occupied more and more areas like a spreading fungus. Samuel didn't know what happened to him, and Lincoln just watched calmly, watching him want the Big Boss to completely transform. In space, or in the sky, the officer stared closely at the rooftop of the only Manhattan building they could stare at, and the drastic changes in Samuel were clearly visible. What's going on? Maybe it's the Hulk's blood that caused the change. The intelligence officer took out the information about Samuel. It says here that Samuel's wound has been in contact with Hulk's blood, and it directly caused this change. I see. The observer nodded, and then said, "So Samuel in this state will make Mr. Lincoln unhappy?" "Probably not." The intelligence officer shook his head. "Mr. Lincoln seems to know as much about Samuel as we do." "That's good." Hearing this answer, the observer couldn't help but show a trace of relaxation on his face. As long as Mr. Lincoln is happy. As for Samuel, he pondered for a moment. "Tell Ross that he can completely delete Samuel's file." "Yes. Let me go." Let me go. The discomfort of being bound greatly stimulated the tyranny factor in Hulk's blood. The big boss roared wildly, and the pupils, that had gradually changed color, were full of madness and anger. Lincoln ignored him, but calmly took out a pair of pliers from the space and placed them on the big boss's fingers, and then click. A green finger was cut short, and yellow-green blood flowed from the wound, which was collected by the container prepared by Lincoln. The pain made the big boss tremble. He looked at Lincoln's calm eyes and the pipe clamp that had clamped his second finger, and he suddenly calmed down. Stop. Stop. What are you going to do? Lincoln looked at the panting big boss calmly, threw the pipe clamp in his hand into the iron bucket, wiped his hands with a white cloth, and sat back in the chair. It seems that you can still talk properly. Why did you pretend before, making us all unhappy? The tide of pain constantly hit the big boss's nerves, so that his mind was no longer occupied by the impulse of anger and destruction. Lincoln, who would take ruthless actions at the slightest disagreement, made him maintain a certain degree of calmness. He looked at Lincoln with fear and resentment in his eyes. He took a few deep breaths before speaking again. What are you going to do? Didn't I tell you? Lincoln pointed at the big green head of the big boss. I'm going to cure it with you. Big boss? With a head full of question marks, the big boss stared at Lincoln seriously for a while, and then he was sure that Lincoln was not joking with him. But if it wasn't a joke, it would be even more terrifying. Okay, you actually want me to help you kill myself? Are you still a human? Exclamation mark. The big boss roared madly in his heart, but the broken fingers in the iron bucket made it impossible for him to be tough. Samuel's personality is not evil, but it changed after being affected by the factor in Hulk's blood. The newly born personality of the big boss has nothing to do with Samuel. The big boss relies on the remnants of Samuel's personality and the Hulk factor to exist. No matter which one is removed, it means the demise of the current big boss, which he absolutely cannot tolerate. Not to mention that the big boss has no way to remove the Hulk factor in his body now. Even if he has it, he will never tell Lincoln. Don't dream. The muscles on the big boss's face twitched because of the pain, and he looked at Lincoln with a little relief. My genes have changed fundamentally. Unless you can screen out my previous genes and completely reorganize them, I will never be able to return to my previous appearance. In addition, even if you can do the above points, as long as the special components in the Hulk's body still exist, I will continue to transform. I'm immortal. Human technology is simply impossible to erase me. So that's the case. What a pity. Looking at the big boss, who unconsciously began to laugh wildly again, Lincoln couldn't help but sigh. He put down the cup in his hand, silently took out a pistol, and loaded a bullet into the magazine in the big boss's stiff eyes. Since there is no way to cure you, then I can only kill you. As he said, Lincoln pointed the muzzle of the gun at the big boss's head without any hesitation, and then pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound of gunfire echoed on the rooftop. The yellow bullet instantly pierced through the air and hit the hard concrete wall, shrinking into a ball. Looking at the big boss, whose head tilted to the side, Lincoln narrowed his eyes slightly. It seems that the changes brought to you by Hulk's blood are not limited to your brain. Even if you calculate the direction of my gun muzzle and the movement of my fingers, you still need good reaction speed and physical fitness to dodge. But it's nothing. It's just bullets. I have plenty of them. While speaking, Lincoln ejected the magazine. This time, he filled the magazine with more bullets, and then raised the pistol again. I hope you can dodge more cleanly this time. The black muzzle of the gun aimed at the big boss's body again. This time, no one would doubt whether Lincoln would shoot, because there was a shrunken bullet on the ground behind the big boss. The dark muzzle of the gun was like a bottomless abyss, which could fire a bullet that could penetrate a person's head at any time. The big boss stared straight at the muzzle of the gun, trembling all over. Dodging a bullet previously was the result of concentration and luck, but facing a whole magazine of bullets, he would definitely die. Die. How could he be willing to die? Exclamation mark. He wanted to live. At the moment, when Lincoln's fingers were about to shrink, the big boss spoke. I can cooperate with you. I can cooperate with you to study a way to cure me. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Lincoln stopped what he was doing, tilted his head, and looked at the big boss with a smile. It's a good suggestion, but I think you seem to be teasing me. I didn't. Fearing that Lincoln would shoot, the big boss hurriedly shook his head. "I can cooperate with you. I promise." Hearing this, Lincoln's gun muzzle moved down slightly, but the words he said made the big boss feel cold all over. "I'm also willing to believe you, but the bullets have to be used. After they are loaded." The big boss seemed to realize something, and his face was full of fear. The next moment, Lincoln pulled the trigger. Bang 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 bang. A series of gunshots rang out, and Lincoln, without changing his expression, poured all the bullets in a magazine into the big boss's limbs. The yellow bullets easily tore his flesh and bones, and with a heart-wrenching wail, the big boss truly became an evil scientist who relied on his brain. Throwing the pistol with gunpowder coming out of the muzzle aside, Lincoln looked up and looked into the distance. "Take him away, don't let him die." Chapter 61 Captain, the energy barrier is indestructible. Lincoln had no hope that Big Boss could find a way to cure himself. So it would be more realistic to guess how much effort he would make to escape from Manhattan Building with the help of the laboratory rather than discussing whether he would cure himself. Although Big Boss looked ugly, it was undeniable that the knowledge contained in his huge head was proportional to its size. Given enough time, Big Boss would not necessarily be able to develop less technology than Stark. Anyone who understood sustainable development would definitely find a way to bring Big Boss under his command and use it for his own benefit. But Lincoln didn't care. He had enough strength and enough trump cards, so he didn't care about Big Boss's potential value. The reason why Big Boss was still kept was because killing him now would not completely fill the golden string, even if one more abomination was added. In this case, let Big Boss continue to live, and by the way, see if the people behind the firm had any ideas of making trouble. If so, it would be a good opportunity to kill another group of people to establish his authority. The Big Boss has great potential and is worth being vigilant about, so Lincoln decided to take a walk around Wakanda and bring back the heart-shaped grass there to plant in his own display cabinet. Wakanda, with the advantages brought by superstandard materials such as vibranium, this country composed of 5 black tribes has become the master of the highest technology on the planet. The existence of the energy barrier has always made Wakanda a lush tropical rainforest in the eyes of the outside world, but it is not known that under the energy barrier is a highly developed society. The implementation of the closed policy to the outside world has protected Wakanda's vibranium mines, and at the same time, the outside world knows very little about it. But this does not mean that Wakanda also knows very little about the outside world. On the contrary, they have many information collection channels in the outside world, such as embassies and seats in the United Nations. The existence of a small transparent person makes them not be seen by those who lead the establishment of the joint office, but the existence of the information channel makes them know the existence of Lincoln, a Superman. Your Majesty, up to now, we still know very little about the man named Lincoln. The captain of the guard said respectfully, the governments of other countries outside have jointly blocked and destroyed all the information about Lincoln. The remaining information is all stored in the joint office, and our people cannot infiltrate it. The king looked at the captain of the guard and pondered for a moment. Why? The captain of the guard was silent for a moment because of skin color. Before the king could speak, the captain of the guard continued to explain. Under the United Nations system, white people and yellow people all have dominant countries, but we don't, so we are excluded from the system. Moreover, according to some of the information displayed, the man named Lincoln doesn't seem to like too many black people around him. Discrimination. This is naked discrimination. But even the king of Wakanda couldn't say anything when faced with this discrimination. The closed policy was implemented by them on their own initiative, so they couldn't become one of the important participants in the office. And what really played a decisive role in this was Lincoln's personal preference. Unless they can change Lincoln's mind, they are doomed to fail to achieve their goal. The possibility of directly obtaining the information had been rejected. The king could not help but fall into deep thought, but before he could recover from his meditation, a group of footsteps came in from outside the door. Father, look what I found. Hearing the voice with a hint of joy, the king suddenly broke away from his previous meditation. He looked up at the girl in front of him with a smile on his face. It turned out to be Suayui. What did you find? I intercepted some pictures and videos. Suayui happily showed the tablet in his hand to the king and tapped it with his fingers a few times. I calculated the relevant data of that Lincoln through these things. This should be something to be happy about, but the king's face showed a trace of solemnity. Suayui, you privately connected to the external network again. Don't worry, I just collected some information on the public network, and I definitely didn't invade the top secret databases of those countries. Hearing Suayui's assurance, the king's face was relaxed, but looking at the data displayed on the tablet, he couldn't help but fall into silence again. Just like the first reaction of the people from the American and other governments, when they saw the data, the king subconsciously didn't believe the data displayed on it. But then, he realized that this was true. Handing the tablet in his hand to the captain of the guard, the king asked in a deep voice, according to the technological level of our country, is there a way to deal with him? Of course. The captain of the guard said firmly, if this data is true, he can't even break through our energy barrier. Beep, beep. As soon as the captain of the guard finished speaking, a shrill alarm sounded throughout the palace. This was an alarm that would only be triggered in one situation. The energy barrier was breached. Realizing what had happened, everyone's face changed drastically. They no longer cared about discussing the strength of Lincoln and the weapons in their hands, and looked out together. The dome-like energy barrier hung high above the capital of Wakanda, protecting them from being disturbed by the outside world for decades. The energy barrier built on the basis of vibranium technology has enough strength that even a direct impact from a space battleship cannot break it. But today, this barrier that has always been regarded as indestructible by the Wakandans has been broken. Ordinary people with limited vision cannot see what is happening outside the barrier, but Shuri and others who master the core technology can see it clearly. The man they were discussing a few minutes ago was now hanging in the air in a black cloak, with blazing beams of light bursting out from his pupils. The powerful impact caused waves on the energy barrier, and the temperature was so high that it was difficult to measure, that it pierced the barrier and dissolved the core. With a huge roar, the energy barrier, that was originally tightly closed, was forcibly torn open, leaving a crack that soared into the sky. The energy barrier was created thanks to the existence of the core of the vibranium material, which has always been regarded as an indestructible and invincible defense. However, today, the indestructible defense was torn open. In the royal city, looking at the crack that soared into the sky from a distance, the captain of the guards was full of disbelief. This is impossible. The energy barrier can't be so fragile. Maybe the data we collected is wrong. The king's voice sounded beside her. Okay, go and make arrangements. I want to meet this guest. Maybe we still have something to talk about. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Friendly Negotiations. Lincoln passed through the crack. Behind him, the huge barrier crack began to slowly repair itself. In front of him, a number of spaceships and warships were already flying from a distance, surrounding him. On the magnetic levitation disc, Wakanda's guard captain held a vibranium spear and looked at Lincoln with vigilance in his eyes. The king wants to see you. Come with me. King? What does the king of your country have to do with me? At this point, Lincoln paused, then a sneer appeared on his face, and a faint red light appeared in his pupils. Could it be that he is going to command me? Being watched by Lincoln with red light in his eyes, the guard captain felt that the person standing in front of him was not a concrete person, but an abstract, terrifying existence. Even a wisp of breath emitted from it made her hair stand up, and her heart tremble. Like a stress response, she subconsciously clenched the vibranium spear in her hand and pointed the tip of the spear at Lincoln, but the next moment, a force that she could not resist was transmitted along the spear. When she came to her senses, she realized that the spear in her hand had been pulled out and held in Lincoln's hand. What a waste of resources. Lincoln's perspective swept over the spear, and he could see at a glance that the main body of the spear and even the internal materials were all made of vibranium. If the vibranium material of this spear was placed in the outside world, those scientists could create extraordinary technological products. But here, the people of Wakanda only used it to make a spear. A spear that looks very powerful, but in fact, the value of the material itself is not brought into play. Lincoln did not intend to have too much communication with this group of people in Wakanda, but seeing how they used vibranium, Lincoln suddenly felt that it seemed okay to have another vibranium vein in his display case. Lincoln held the spear and fell into deep thought, while the other guards of Wakanda raised the spear tip, as if they were facing a great enemy. The energy generator integrated in the spear was activated, and a ray of energy luster was looming on the tip of the spear. Such a strong hostility attracted Lincoln's attention in an instant. He raised his eyelids and looked at the crowd in front of him and snorted coldly. It was like a thunderbolt from the blue sky exploding in the heart. The terrifying pressure was instantly exerted on the guards. The air around them seemed to turn into solid steel to imprison their bodies. Even the fluttering of a hair was firmly fixed. Lincoln casually swung the spear. The terrifying power in his body instantly made the speed of the spear exceed the speed of sound. Amid the roaring sonic boom, the tip of the spear easily pierced the armor of a spaceship. Amid the roaring sparks of the engine explosion, the spaceship circled and fell to the ground, splashing a cloud of dust. Without caring about the life and death of the pilot, Lincoln turned and walked out, his voice stern. There is no need to meet. Tell your king that the heart-shaped grass, one male and one female, will be delivered to my building on time at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. If it is late, Wakanda will no longer exist. After that, he ignored the reactions of the guards, waved his hand to split the energy barrier and left leisurely. Until his back disappeared into the sky, the guards who swore allegiance and surrounded Wakanda did not make any defensive moves. The BO force field is a good thing. It can protect something or suppress something. Lincoln had developed this use of the BO force field a long time ago. The members of the guard should feel proud and honored to receive the same treatment as the two monsters that Hulk hated. Lincoln left. He waved his sleeves and left without taking away a cloud. He only left a huge problem for the king of Wakanda in the palace. At the meeting seat, composed of tribal leaders and the king of Wakanda, the leader of the mining tribe shouted loudly, "No. The heart-shaped grass is the most important secret of Wakanda. I will never allow it to fall into the hands of those people outside. But if it is not handed over, it means war." The leader of the merchant tribe said, "He has shown the ability to break through our energy barrier. At that time, what happened in Neon will happen again in Wakanda, and it will be even bloodier. We have spaceships, we have weapons, we can defend our homes. But the fact is that our weapons and spaceships can't fight him at all." The leader of the border tribe, who had once had contact with Lincoln, sneered, "My warriors were at the scene. In front of him, the bravest warriors of my tribe could not exert their strength. Your proposal is to let our warriors die. I absolutely disagree with you." Looking at the leader of the border tribe who stood up and was ready to take action, the leader of the mining tribe was already a little scared, but he still kept saying, "If those people outside are allowed to breed and cultivate heart-shaped grass on a large scale, the final result will be the same." The Jabari tribe refused to join Wakanda, so there were only 4 tribes actually participating in the entire meeting. Except for the mining tribe, that insisted on opposing. The thoughts of the remaining few people were clear at a glance. With a long sigh, the current king of Black Panther finally spoke, "Peace and security in Wakanda are more important than anything else. I will select 2 heart-shaped grasses from the plantation and personally deliver them to the Manhattan building to ensure that it will not stay in the hands of anyone else." But, isn't the result the same? The people of the mining tribe were still a little unwilling, and the king could only explain. He is high above, and is not on the same front as the governments outside. So, if it's just him who wants it, maybe the situation won't get so bad. The king's explanation was equivalent to the final decision. No matter how unwilling the people of the mining tribe were, they could only agree to this decision. The meeting ended hastily, and few people knew the content of the meeting. Even the prince and princess T'Challa were unaware of it. Under the escort of Dora's guards, the king walked through the dim tunnel all the way and came to the plantation. The existence of the heart-shaped grass relies on vibranium rather than sunlight, so even in the plantation without sunlight, the heart-shaped grass can still emit purple light, which contains powerful power. The plantation was once the most important secret of Wakanda, but now, as the king put the soil, where the two heart-shaped grasses grew into a container, this most important secret is no longer a secret. Do you need me to prepare a spaceship for you? No need. The king shook his head and closed the fully enclosed box. I will leave immediately and take it to the Manhattan building. Everything will go well. Chapter 63, Shock Chaka. Wakanda's vibranium comes from outer space, but Wakanda is not the only country on Earth that has vibranium. When it fell to Earth, the huge vibranium meteorite was split into several pieces under the action of sound waves and scattered all over the world. Even in Wakanda, the main crash site, the vibranium mine is a structure of a main vein plus several small veins. Lincoln was not interested in those small vibranium fragments of only a few hundred tons. His real eyes were completely locked on the main vein that weighed at least 10,000 tons. The shape of the main vein was not very good, but there was a lot of shaping space. When the time came, it would be reduced and put in the display cabinet. It would definitely be a priceless collection. Lincoln had enough power to move the entire vein, but the problem was that he had not built a suitable display cabinet. It is not a simple matter to constantly shrink a vein of tens of thousands of tons and fix it in a space, and it feels a bit out of place to put this thing on the 7th floor. Lincoln plans to prepare a display cabinet for it on a higher floor. Therefore, the vibranium vein will have to be kept in Wakanda for a while. When he has completely finished the collection hall, he can add one. But before the mineral collection is added, perhaps his special plant collection will be added first. The satellites deployed by humans in space are not qualified to monitor Lincoln's actions at all, and the technological curtain created by Wakanda has covered up everything that happened in Wakanda. Faced with the sudden visit of the King of Wakanda, the people in the office were confused and had no idea when Lincoln had contacted this small African country. They were very strange, but obviously, when things involved Lincoln, all actions must become cautious. They dared not ask Lincoln, and they could not even put pressure on Wakanda, for fear that Lincoln would be unhappy and unwilling to enjoy life. Downstairs of the Manhattan building, looking up at the towering stairs, for some reason, Chaka felt a little uneasy. He didn't know what was in this building, nor did he know whether he and his country could get peace because of his bowing and concession. Faced with Lincoln's strong attitude, he seemed to have no better choice than to be uneasy. Chaka's hesitation and anxiety did not last long, because Elia appeared in front of him. "Mr. Lincoln is waiting for you inside. Come with me." Chaka knew Elia. According to the intelligence, she was a female agent specially selected and sent to Lincoln. Elia's appearance comforted Chaka's heart a little, and he followed her into the building. Entering the special transparent elevator that was not open to ordinary people, Chaka couldn't help but tighten his grip on the box. Not long after, the elevator stopped on the 7th floor. The elevator door opened, and Chaka could clearly see several display cabinets lit up in the empty floor, and Lincoln sitting in a chair drinking tea. Elia did not lead the way, but pointed outside. "You can go in." Chaka nodded, took the box with the heart-shaped grass, and walked out of the elevator. The elevator door closed silently behind him and left. The soft light shining from the display cabinet made Chaka's steps slow down a little. He was very curious about what was in these display cases. Slowing down his pace allowed him to clearly see the items on display in the display cases and the words on the nameplate. But when he saw the first exhibit, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. Item: Super Soldier Serum. Source: Marvel World. Function: strengthen the human body to reach the human limit. Wakanda's intelligence department could not steal secrets about Lincoln, but Chaka was very clear about the Super Soldier Serum, which once changed the course of World War II. If the heart-shaped grass is a masterpiece of nature, then the Super Soldier Serum is the crystallization of human wisdom. Whether it is Captain America Steve Rogers or the Red Skull of Hydra, they were all born because of this super serum. However, if I remember correctly, wasn't the formula of the Super Soldier Serum completely lost more than 60 years ago? Exclamation mark. Even Howard Stark failed to successfully restore the Erskine version of the Super Soldier Serum. Why is it here? Yes, I heard that only 6 of the 7 serums were used at the beginning, so it seems reasonable that the remaining one appears here. What the hell? Everyone knows how much the Americans want the super soldier serum. Ross even created the Hulk and the Abomination. As a result, the things that the group of people can only dream of are now quietly placed in the display cabinet as exhibits. It's simply inhumane. Chaka couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He kept walking, and soon his eyes moved away from the super soldier serum. Then, he saw a group of green cells in the second display cabinet. Then, he subconsciously read the words on the nameplate. Item, Hulk's all-powerful cells. Source, Marvel World. Function, after directional induction of differentiation, it can grow into a second Hulk. Hulk's all-powerful cells differentiate into a second Hulk. Seeing this string of words, Chaka was silent. In the container, even if it is separated from the main body and exists alone, the green all-powerful cells are still wriggling all the time, showing its powerful and abundant vitality to the outside world. But if you only look at this group of cells, who would have thought that this small group of cells can actually be cultivated into a monster like the Hulk that can resist tanks? Those people in the army couldn't think of it because they couldn't even break the Hulk's defense. Chaka couldn't think of it either because his first idea was to completely wipe out dangerous creatures like the Hulk rather than extract his omnipotent cells for collection. What does that source, Marvel World mean? Does it mean that there are other worlds out there? Who named the Marvel World? Damn. It's really outrageous. For the first time in his life, Chaka sighed in his heart. In the first half of his life, he felt that he had seen all kinds of outrageous things, but now, he felt that maybe there were more outrageous things in the world that he hadn't seen. The number of collections in Lincoln's collection is scarce, but the 2 collections in front of him are enough to shock Chaka and stop, until Lincoln's voice sounded behind him. What are you thinking? Whether these things are true or false? The sudden voice startled Chaka, and he hesitated and said, I remember that the super soldier serum was said to be completely gone. From the perspective of America and others, it is indeed gone. Lincoln nodded, then smiled and said, because the last one was taken away by me. Thanks to Sunny Mad God for the reward of 500 points, and thanks to Fengziloi for the reward of 500 points. Chapter 64 The Hidden Boss. Lincoln's straightforwardness made Chaka stunned, and then sighed again. Wakanda had no contact with the outside world during World War II, but they knew about the strength of the Allied forces and Hydra at that time. In that era, all kinds of black technologies that surpassed the times emerged in an endless stream, and even now they are ahead of their time. In this situation, Lincoln not only took away the serum from the double team of the Allied forces and Hydra, but also forged a false history to make the intelligence departments of all countries, including Wakanda, believe that the serum had completely disappeared. This is not the most important thing. What really shocked Chaka was that Lincoln had no signs of aging after 60 years. This is something that Wakanda's technology can't do. He didn't know how Lincoln did it, which made him even more afraid of the mystery behind Lincoln. Chaka was a little confused by the massive amount of information, but Lincoln stretched out his hand and took the box containing 2 heart-shaped grasses. Opening the tightly closed lid, 2 heart-shaped grasses with blue-purple luster deep in the stamens appeared in Lincoln's eyes. There were 2 heart-shaped grasses, 1 male and 1 female, plus a layer of soil for the heart-shaped grass to grow. Chaka did not try to do anything extra. The heart-shaped grass grew well and did not wilt because it left its original growth environment. Lincoln tapped the trumpet like flower, and the feedback from his fingertips allowed him to clearly sense the powerful power contained in the tender flowers and leaves. Not bad, not bad. Lincoln smiled slightly after confirming that the heart-shaped grass would not suddenly die. He waved his hand casually, and an inexplicable force disintegrated the box containing the heart-shaped grass in the air. In the empty display case, a black spot rolled up. After just a few seconds, a thick layer of black soil was laid in the display case. He put the heart-shaped grass into the pit prepared in advance, and a red light bloomed in Lincoln's eyes. After a few breaths, a new nameplate was born. Item, heart-shaped grass. Source, Marvel World. Function, stimulate human potential. Looking at the nameplate, Chaka's lips couldn't help but move twice, and finally he said, the function is wrong. Wrong? Lincoln looked back at Chaka. Are you trying to say that the ability of the heart-shaped grass is to communicate into the ancestral realm and gain power from Black Panther? After Lincoln revealed the secret of the heart-shaped grass, Chaka finally showed visible shock on his face. How did you know? The secret of the heart-shaped grass has never been leaked. As long as someone knows, the secret is always relative. Lincoln's face was indifferent. Whether a secret is a secret or not depends only on whether I want to know, not on whether you want to say it. Lincoln's words made Chaka stunned for a moment, and then he saw Lincoln look at the heart-shaped grass again. Your understanding of the heart-shaped grass is correct, but it is not correct for me. The heart-shaped grass affected by the vibranium factor itself has the ability to activate the potential of the human body. As for the so-called ancestral realm, it's just that Black Panther helped you reduce some mortality rates. I see that your technology is not low, but judging from your thoughts, you are still ignorant and worship the gods. As he spoke, Lincoln raised his palm and pushed Chaka hard. Whoosh! The whistling wind rushed past his ears, followed by a chaotic scene and a sense of weightlessness. It was not until the world in front of him returned to normal that he realized that he had stood on the street again without knowing when. Chaka looked up and saw the towering Manhattan building in front of him. Except that the box in his hand had disappeared. It was as if he had never walked into this building before. A feeling of powerlessness. As the current Black Panther who had taken the heart-shaped grass, Chaka felt so powerless for the first time. He was sent out of the building before he even realized what Lincoln had done. Chaka did not make any other attempts and turned around and left the Manhattan building. In the dark, the agents hidden in different positions looked at Chaka's receding back, looked at each other, and decisively sent the new information up. Except for the rooftop and the open areas below the 7th floor, the rest of the Manhattan building is simply undetectable to the firm. In addition to obtaining some information from the agents, they have no pictures to record everything in the Manhattan building. Lincoln did not warn them, but no one dared to do so, fearing that prying into privacy would make Lincoln unhappy, which could kill people. The top floor of the Manhattan building is a hastily built laboratory, or rather, the floors starting from the 90th floor are all laboratories. The environment of the entire room is very simple, but it has everything it should have. As for the big boss, whose limbs were broken by Lincoln before, his injuries have been treated, but it is not known whether they have been completely cured. It is probably constant in a state where the blood circulation has returned to normal, but there is no ability to move. Hulk's unparalleled self-healing ability did not show up in the big boss, or it may have shown up, but it was suppressed by the people in the firm in some special way. In short, when Lincoln walked into the laboratory, he saw a quadriplegic but strong-willed evil scientist who used his mouth to command the scientific researchers to conduct experiments. As the saying goes, the only way to deal with an evil person is to be more evil. When facing the army and the American government, the big boss can refuse many of their requests because he knows that those people in the army will not kill him easily. But when facing Lincoln, he will be shot in the head as soon as he refuses. When facing the army and even the government, the big boss is rampant and fearless, but when facing Lincoln, he tucks his tail between his legs. Fake. This is the real thought in the big boss's mind. The limbs are disabled. This does not affect him from using his smart brain to think of a way to escape. Those stupid human scientists simply cannot fully understand the theories and processes proposed by the big boss and are deceived like a fool to do whatever the big boss wants them to do. Heal yourself? The big boss never had this idea. His purpose from beginning to end was only one: to heal his limbs and then escape from this building. Yes, it was to escape, not to seek revenge. Although he had mutated into an evil scientist, he was smart enough to realize that it was better not to confront Lincoln, a ruthless character with strong martial arts and the ability to kill people at will. He was waiting for an opportunity, a chance for Lincoln to leave the Manhattan building. As long as he was given this opportunity, he would rise from his dormant state and teach those stupid researchers a lesson. Chapter 65. I'm glad that the experiment failed. The rooftop. Bathed in the warm sunshine, Lincoln's fingertips randomly sketched in the air. Strands of golden magic power were condensed into lines and spots of light that kept changing in the air. Ordinary people could not understand the laws and meanings contained in the changes, but Lincoln could clearly see the space that was constantly distorted and changing with the changes in magic power. There are too many means in this world that can affect space, and the space gem is just the one with the lowest threshold and the best use. In addition to using the power of gems, whether it is the portal of Camotage or the Rainbow Bridge of Asgard, they are always of using space, not to mention the space technology of advanced civilizations in outer space. However, none of the above can provide any reference for Lincoln. It's just the space bridging technology, which he has already mastered. What he needs now is a stable means of shrinking space. In this regard, unless he can pull Ancient One over to work as a laborer, there is nothing on Earth that can provide reference, and the space gem is not good either. Using a gun as an analogy, Lincoln is now trying to make a new gun, based on the result he wants. The Space Stone, on the other hand, is an arsenal of all weapons. With the stone, Lincoln can directly use the weapons in it to achieve his goal. But if he wants to learn from the structure of the weapons, to make his own weapons, he has to disassemble the weapons in the arsenal first. If it is really a concrete weapon, it is very simple to do this. The problem is that the Space Stone is a whole, and it is impossible to disassemble a weapon alone. Therefore, it is not a feasible method to count on this thing. By integrating the magic knowledge accumulated by Camotage for thousands of years, even if Lincoln is not in a state of full brain power now, his understanding of magic is enough to reach a level close to that of the Ancient One. With rich magic knowledge and abundant magic power, even if Lincoln is just thinking and randomly combining different magic structures, the energy fluctuations it drives are enough to make the detectors in the human world send out a shrill alarm. On the rooftop not far from the Manhattan building, looking at the detection equipment that keeps sending out shrill alarms, a group of scientists are scratching their heads in worry. They look at the screen in front of them, and the energy fluctuation value on it is beyond their imagination. The energy index was so strong that it almost exceeded the detection limit, and the next moment it actually fed back negative energy values that existed only in theory. Formulas, theories, everything they had learned before seemed to be overturned. Numbers were continuously output to everyone by the machine, but looking at the dense numbers, no one could see the connection between them. They felt that they were facing a completely disordered chaotic system that was unfathomable. Since the day Lincoln was thinking about the space reduction structure on the rooftop, they have been tortured. Until now, they have completely given up on exploration. After numbly setting the automatic detection and recording settings, they gathered in front of the monitoring screen and watched the magic structure created by Lincoln, which was changing unpredictably in the air, from a distance of dozens or hundreds of meters. A researcher stared at the golden structure, looking at the record form in his hand from time to time, his eyes full of divine light. Amazing. Incredible. This level of energy is actually something that humans can control. Don't dream. Another person said in a voice of attack. From the current energy index, the energy contained in the golden structure can easily turn any organic life into ashes. We can survive because we are far away, and that person can survive because he can ignore this level of energy value. Perhaps this structure has a special meaning. One person guessed, maybe we can record and imitate the whole process, and maybe we can control the energy. Your idea is very good, but I think we need to listen to the opinions of material scientists first. Aren't you curious? Where does such a powerful energy come from? I didn't detect any signs of nuclear radiation. Maybe it's a fusion product. As soon as he finished speaking, he found that his colleagues around him looked at him like he was mentally retarded. After a while, someone spoke up and said, if you can explain how Superman in the comics can extinguish the sun by drawing power from the sun, then I can explain the source of energy to you. After speaking, he turned around and discussed the possibility of the structure with others, leaving the researcher who raised the question in silence. When people are on the right path, time is always meaningful. In front of Lincoln, the structure changed again and again, and finally the originally distorted and irregular space showed a tendency. It was just a fleeting opportunity, but Lincoln captured it accurately. Fix, enlarge, analyze, reconstruct, analyze again, and reconstruct again. The tendency of space is no longer limited to one place, but is reflected in all directions. After a moment, looking at the magic structure in the palm of his hand, that can operate on its own even without control, Lincoln's eyes moved around and reached out to press the table beside him. The space was distorted and changed, and the large table was shrunk and sealed in the golden magic structure in a way that ordinary people could not understand. Just a little magic power is enough to shrink the normal sized table by dozens of times, making it as small and exquisite as a toy. The table was constantly released and sealed. After many experiments, there was no change in the structure of the table. As he increased the amount of magic power he used, the table that was originally like an exquisite toy began to shrink rapidly. In just a few breaths, it has changed from being visible to the naked eye to a microscopic creation that can only be seen with a high-power microscope. The molecular structure of the table did not change during this process, only the space changed, which led to the change of the table. It's done. Putting the table back out, Lincoln closed his 5 fingers to hide the golden magic structure, stood up and took a step out, disappearing on the rooftop. In the 7th floor collection room, Lincoln looked at the top floor laboratory in Manhattan and moved his fingers slightly, and the elevator, that originally required permission to open, was no longer restricted by permission. After doing all this, he smiled and walked towards the counter. "Don't let me down, big boss." In the distance, looking at the empty rooftop of the Manhattan building, the researchers who had been observing the screen were completely stunned. After a long time, someone murmured, "That was just the space zoom technology." It was like a thunder explosion, and everyone went crazy. Space zoom technology. It's space zoom technology. Have you memorized that architecture? You must memorize it. You must master it. That's space zoom technology. Mastering it means mastering the future. The researchers sent by the agency who didn't know that magic power could not be controlled by conventional means were completely crazy. And in the laboratory in the Manhattan building, the big boss who had been dormant suddenly had an idea. Without any basis, only relying on intuition, he felt that his chance had come. Without any hesitation, he directly activated the healing plan that had been prepared earlier, and those scientists who had been deceived began the final treatment according to his command. The drug used to cure the Hulk factor was injected into the big boss's body in large quantities. Under the overdose, the drug that was originally proven to suppress the Hulk factor had the opposite effect. Under the effect of the drug, the big boss's body cells began to divide and repair rapidly. In just a few minutes, all the injuries left on his body were completely repaired, and he became stronger. Standing up from the wheelchair, the big boss, who had grown taller, looked coldly at the panicked researchers in front of him with his green eyes, sneering, "I'm glad the experiment has failed." Chapter 66 Crisis. The laboratory on the top floor of Manhattan building. The intelligence of different levels makes the researchers and the officers easy to deceive as children in front of the big boss. The excessive amount of drugs promotes the division of the big boss's cells, and the existence of energy rays provides the basis for his transformation. In the horrified eyes of the researchers, the big boss's body is rapidly expanding and transforming. His originally weak muscles began to become firm and powerful, and his bones were as strong as forged steel. His head, which was already large enough, began to transform again. This transformation is almost tearing in nature. It can be seen with the naked eye that the head, which was originally only 2 or 3 times the size of an ordinary person's head, has expanded to almost the same size as the big boss's body. If his body had not been strengthened a lot by the effect of the drugs, he might even be directly crushed to the ground by the huge and heavy head. The equipment distributed in the laboratory was forcibly torn apart. The big boss stretched out his hand to tear open the pipes that were constantly leaking gas, and stood in front of the researchers on the cold floor in the gushing air. The big boss, who had grown taller, looked down at the terrified researchers and laughed strangely. "A group of stupid organic creatures. This is the trend of life evolution." The big boss clenched his hands and felt the power born from his body that was transformed from the inside out. Strong physical fitness, thinking and wisdom beyond the limit, and the ability to control the spirit of weak life forms. But, as the voice fell, a strong mental force spread out from the big boss. In just a moment, all the researchers in the entire laboratory turned into puppets under the big boss. The big boss frantically read the knowledge in the minds of these researchers and controlled their bodies to complete everything he wanted in the laboratory. As the information about the firm was known to the big boss, he knew that his plan to leave directly had failed. While Lincoln was away, he needed to prepare something for himself to break through the siege of the humans outside. It was not enough to rely on his own strength. In the top floor laboratory, a group of self-lost researchers were like mechanical puppets, controlling the instruments and equipment to make new machines according to the big boss's ideas. The big boss himself took the authorized elevator to the downstairs. The high-speed elevator quickly crossed a straight distance of hundreds of meters and stopped at the 7th floor, the only floor with lights on. Looking at the collections and the 3 display cases and the nameplates on them, the big boss laughed wildly, stretched out his hand and pushed, and a gamma ray was stimulated from his palm. After a few breaths, the ultra-high strength display case was broken, and the big boss returned to the laboratory on the top floor with the 3 collections. Without any pre-experiment, the big boss crushed a heart-shaped grass and stuffed it into his mouth like the craziest orc, and stabbed the tube of super soldier serum into his body without hesitation. The azure blue liquid was transported to the whole body through the big boss's blood, and the chemical components hidden in the liquid began to transform his body. At the same time, the mysterious power of the heart-shaped grass also began to play a role, and began to release the remaining potential in the big boss's body. Under the triple effect of serum, heart-shaped grass, and the gamma-ray generator that was reopened by the eyes, the big boss's body began to transform for the 3rd time less than 5 minutes after the 2nd transformation. Under the powerful drug, the big boss's body began to swell again. His body surface was torn into purple stripes. The terrifying force was pulling his body, and even the genes that were originally as solid as iron chains were completely broken. His body was shaking constantly, and he could hardly bear this terrifying change, but suddenly, a golden magic power suddenly drilled into his body. The almost crushing power level forcibly curbed all the collapse in his body in an incredible way. The 2 drug powers were also forcibly blended, and the transformation that was about to be interrupted was forcibly pushed to the completion stage. On the yellow-green skin, purple lines spread. After the 3rd development was completed, even the big boss's body could not support and stabilize the big head. But he no longer needs it. The originally limited mental power has expanded to a level he had never imagined before. Just a casual glance, the steel not far away was easily bent and twisted. With another move in his heart, a fierce gamma ray surged out, instantly penetrating the body of a researcher and obliterating him. Inducing the differentiation of Hulk's omnipotent cells, the big boss laughed strangely, and the eerie sound echoed in the room. A large amount of materials also rose into the air under his mental power, deformed and combined. After a few breaths, a steel throne appeared. Embedding himself into the steel throne, the big boss swept his eyes over the puppets, and the burst of mental power tore their brains apart like a bomb. Controlling the huge throne, the big boss broke the curtain wall in front of him and appeared in front of the world. When the super soldier serum was enhanced for the 3rd time, it greatly enhanced the big boss's body and mind, but it also caused a problem. He became more extreme and crazy than before. Escape. He is not going to escape now. He wants to enslave those weak humans into his puppets and kill the damn Superman who broke his limbs. The Manhattan building belongs to Lincoln, and the people in the office cannot deploy weapons in it at all. This gives the big boss enough time. When he sits on the throne and appears in front of everyone, things have become uncontrollable. From the broken hole in the wall, the monitoring team clearly saw the headless bodies that fell in the laboratory. In an instant, they realized that the hideous and terrifying big-headed monster in front of them was definitely not a decent person. Fire. Kill him. Without any hesitation, the combat teams hidden in various positions were activated, and the guns and cannons were set up in a very short time. With the commander's order, the gunfire roared. Bullets and shells flew towards the big boss, but facing this attack, that was enough to tear steel. The big boss just smiled contemptuously. The powerful mental power spread out from his brain like a substance. In the stunned eyes of everyone, the bullets and shells slowly stopped, as if they were stuck in a quagmire. The brain operation is comparable to that of a supercomputer. In just a moment, the big boss completed the ballistic analysis, turned the bullet's direction, and then shot out. Whoosh, 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 a sharp sound of breaking through the air sounded, and the eyebrows of one special forces member after another were pierced by bullets, and the skull was opened by kinetic energy. What was even more terrifying was the roar and flames produced by the explosion. In this most prosperous Manhattan area, a terrorist attack of the most terrible nature took place. The hurried crowd screamed at this moment and ran around, but as the big boss looked down, the screams only lasted for a few breaths and then stopped. In the incredible eyes of the agency, SHIELD, and all other organizations, the screaming crowds turned into puppets in the hands of the big boss. They lined up and rushed to other parts of the city, bringing more people to be controlled by the big boss. An unprecedented crisis has occurred. Chapter 67 Lessons. In Manhattan, New York, the chaos caused by the big boss has reached an uncontrollable point. With powerful mind control ability, everyone who approaches him will become a puppet, inspired by gamma rays and telekinesis, with both attack and defense means. Unless they are willing to use weapons of mass destruction in Manhattan, the most prosperous district in New York City, there is no better way to deal with the big boss. While the big boss was doing evil with Lincoln's collection, Lincoln, who was playing with a small piece of ore in the Wakanda Palace, was very leisurely, so leisurely that the Wakanda King Chaka couldn't stand it. Your Manhattan building is gone, and your collection is gone. I know, I've seen it. Lincoln smiled slightly, with a little golden light in his pupils, watching the farce in the distance from thousands of miles away. Aren't you going back? Chaka was a little confused. What are you going to do? Lincoln waved his hand nonchalantly. Save that reinforced concrete building? Or go take a look at that empty display case? Lincoln's attitude made Chaka speechless. Yes, the deal between us is done. Lincoln nodded at the table. So, at this time, you'd better consider how Wakanda should integrate into the international community in the future, and make corresponding plans, instead of worrying about a bunch of reinforced concrete things here. I have my own plans. Okay. After hearing this, Chaka finally stopped talking, nodded silently and turned to leave. With the sound of the door closing, Lincoln was the only one left in the huge conference room. He played with the seemingly small, but actually more than 10,000 tons of vibranium, ore in his hand, watching the farce in Manhattan and the distance, and the smile on his mouth became brighter and brighter. Space shrinking magic, a magic that transcends the times. With this magic, if the caster is strong enough, he can even pack up a solar system and take it away. Lincoln can't do it now, but it's still easy to take away something the size of a building. He had some concerns before that the collection museum built in the Marvel world might be targeted by others when he left this world, but now he doesn't have to worry about it. He can just pack up the entire collection museum and take it away. Of course, what he took away would not be the Manhattan building, made of reinforced concrete that could be blown into ruins by any missile, but a brand new collection museum made of vibranium. However, considering that the durability of vibranium is still not very good, Lincoln's real goal is actually the adamantium alloy that is processed from vibranium as the main body. Compared with vibranium, adamantium alloy makes up for the weakness of sound waves, and after forming, it can withstand a temperature of 500,000 degrees Celsius without any signs of melting. Nothing is more suitable than this alloy as the main construction material of the collection museum. As for the previous Manhattan building, it was destroyed, and the collection inside was not worth mentioning. The formula of the super soldier serum is in his mind, and the Hulk's omnipotent cell is not a rare thing. As for the heart-shaped grass, he is now in Wakanda. Even if he is too lazy to build it again, he can easily bring the collection back from the past time period with just the time gem. The birth of the enhanced Big Boss was essentially a farce. If Lincoln hadn't intervened, the Big Boss alone would not have been able to withstand the pressure of the 3-degree increase. The firm had never given up on Lincoln, and Lincoln knew it well. Although they were now law-abiding, Lincoln had already seen the plans they had made in secret. During World War II, Lincoln's decades-long disappearance gave them the courage to covet in secret, and they believed that similar opportunities would definitely appear in the future. At that time, they only needed to get a little sample for research and return it later, and everything would be done without anyone noticing. They planned very well, so Lincoln decided to teach them a little lesson, using the big boss he was going to kill, and the 3 collections, to teach these people a little lesson. Anyway, the big boss was going to die, so it wouldn't be a big deal to make some use of the waste before he died. The big boss looked arrogant now, but in fact his vitality was like a candle in the wind. Even if Lincoln didn't kill him, he would die in a few years due to the side effects of forced fusion. As long as those people can hold out for a year or two under the attack of a crazy evil scientist, the crisis will naturally be resolved. But looking at them, they may not be able to hold out for a day or two. In the Wakanda Palace, Lincoln began to work on the main vein of vibranium. With the dual blessing of powerful force and sound waves of a specific frequency, pieces of fragments were peeled off from the originally rigid vein. Under the magic of space shrinkage, the fragments peeled off from the main vein looked tiny, but any piece of it weighed tens or hundreds of tons in reality. A large number of fragments were peeled off by Lincoln and then purified into the purest vibranium, and the main body, that looked like a single board, was finally shaped into the shape he wanted by Lincoln. After taking a 360-degree look at the vibranium, or that combined metal style and beauty, Lincoln smiled slightly, put it into the pocket blessed by the BO force field, and then picked up the phone on the table. New York, Manhattan. In midair, the big boss with an evil smile sat on the Iron Throne like a demon king. Under the throne, almost materialized spiritual ties extended out, connecting to more and more New York citizens. Behind the bunker in the distance, looking at the big boss laughing wildly in the air and the New York citizens who were like zombies under the Iron Throne, the commander of the front line was full of anger and helplessness. Damn it. From the moment the big boss rushed out of the Manhattan building, they never stopped attacking the big boss. Sniping, explosions, anesthetic gas, and even more means. They tried almost all the weapons that can be used in Manhattan. However, facing the big boss who held a large number of hostages, these means could not even stop his external advancement. A large number of soldiers were killed by bullets controlled by this damn green-headed monster. Even if they hid behind the bunker, they would be ruthlessly wiped out by the gamma rays he stimulated. Faced with this high energy ray, the bunker with limited thickness could not save the lives of the soldiers at all. Even if the ray was weakened, it was still enough to easily kill a human being. In the blocking battles again and again, a large number of corpses were left on the front lines, revealing the efforts they had made before. However, looking at the increasing number of hostages, everything seemed to be in vain. The unpredictable mental means and high energy rays brought much more pressure to the US government than the two people who appeared before, the Abomination Hulk. The panic caused by the dense hostages controlled by the big boss was also far greater than at any time before. They were reluctant to admit it, but in this case, except for the use of large-scale lethal weapons, conventional weapons could not deal with the green-headed monster in front of them. Chapter 68, Belated Arrival. No one could make such a decision at this moment, ignoring the hostages held by the big boss, to use weapons of mass destruction in Manhattan, the richest and most prosperous area in New York. Using weapons of mass destruction is indeed very likely to get rid of the big boss, but at the same time, after that, the mayor of New York City and the president of the United States will all step down. What they are worried about is not how many people will die, but where their future political career will go. The soldiers in front are still blocking the big boss's pace, and behind the front line, Fury is holding the phone in his hand and frantically dialing Lincoln's number. Before, everyone, including him, thought that Lincoln was a guy who should not exist in this world, but now, they are eager for Lincoln to appear in front of them. Busy tone, dial again, busy tone, dial again. After trying again and again, Lincoln's voice finally appeared on the other end of the phone. Hello. Without any preparation, Fury spoke directly. The big boss ran out of your building. He held many hostages. We need you to get rid of him. The big boss? In the Wakanda Palace, Lincoln calmly looked at the big green head above Manhattan and said leisurely, I broke his limbs and gave them to the scientists you sent. Can you tell me how an evil scientist with 4 broken legs ran out to hold hostages? Thinking of the corpse vaguely exposed in the hole in the wall and the debris all over the ground, Fury's eyes twitched twice. He didn't know what happened in the Manhattan building, but he could guess what the reason was, that the big boss with his limbs disabled, and no other mobility except for his mouth became like this. In addition to the fact that those scientists performed some experiments on the big boss that did not meet the requirements, what other explanations could there be? Before Fury could speak, Lincoln on the other end of the phone suddenly remembered something and spoke again. By the way, I just remembered that there seem to be 3 valuable collections in my building. How are they? Fury fell silent and did not speak. Lincoln seemed to know what happened. Super soldier serum, heart-shaped grass, and Hulk's omnipotent cells. I don't care what method you use to cause trouble for your scientists. Pay me equivalent compensation. Understand? Listening to the words with a hint of threat, Fury clenched his teeth. At this time, he no longer cared why there was such a thing as super soldier serum in Lincoln's collection. He only had one thought: to solve the chaos caused by the big boss as soon as possible. Without much hesitation, he agreed to the compensation request. Okay, we will return your losses to you, but now we need you to come back and help us get rid of that guy. Why? We will pay you. Fury took a deep breath. He destroyed your building and collections. You need to take revenge on him, and we will give you extra compensation. It sounds good. I hope you can do it later. Don't worry, I don't have to deceive you. Hearing that Lincoln finally agreed, Fury couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and hung up the phone. He looked at the big boss who was laughing wildly in the distance, and in his heart, he had already put the establishment and expansion of the Avengers at the highest level. He was not sure whether there would be more things like the big boss in the future, but at least, he would never allow it to be like now, where he could only wait for others and had no power to fight back. Hehehe. Fury was thinking about more possibilities about the establishment of the Avengers, and the big boss's weird laughter in the distance suddenly pierced his ears. A sense of crisis surged in his heart. Almost subconsciously, Fury rolled away from the spot and leaned against a stone pier in one go. The next moment, a huge roar came from where he had just stood. Without bothering to check the situation at the scene, Fury crouched and ran away without looking back. He was slightly relieved until he completely disappeared from the sight of the big boss. He came to New York today to find Lincoln, but Lincoln was not found. He happened to encounter the big boss's evil deeds. If he hadn't been clever enough to escape several disasters in a row, he would have been controlled as a hostage or killed like those soldiers in the distance. Being able to survive is also one of his skills. Wakanda Palace. Silently, Lincoln left the heavily guarded palace, just as he walked into the palace silently at the beginning. In New York City, in the temporary Special Biological and Chemical Incident Response Headquarters, Lincoln met Fury, who survived the disaster. Avoiding mind control, hiding from the crowd, and evacuating the dangerous area, Fury's face was filled with several small scars from the dangerous experiences. With several band-aids on his face, Fury finally breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Lincoln's figure. You are finally here. I need you to use your super speed to quickly approach that damn freak and kill him before he reacts to kill the hostages. I can't do it. What? Fury was stunned. Are you kidding me? You have shown that you have this ability in Neon before. Oh, I didn't say that I can't kill him before he reacts, which is easy. I mean, I can't kill him without letting him kill the hostages. Lincoln's words made Fury suddenly calm down. He thought of the worst possibility, but still had a glimmer of hope. What do you mean? The meaning is very simple. Lincoln glanced at him and ruthlessly shattered his expectations. You don't think a super evil villain would use any gentle means to control hostages and puppets? Even terrorists would tie bombs to hostages, let alone a super villain. Lincoln pointed to the crowd in the distance and said, those people are already dead, brain dead. As long as the big boss dies, they will immediately become an incurable corpse. If you don't mind paying a large amount of medical expenses and compensation, I can certainly get rid of the big boss according to your idea. Of course, this needs to be strengthened. Fury was silent for a while and asked, how much do I owe you now? Money? You don't owe me money, you owe me other things. Things that are equivalent to the value of my collection. Lincoln laughed. Gold or US dollars, these things have no value to me. What I want is the things. Plus, if you let me take action, you have to pay an extra collection level item. A total of 4 items. If you are willing to pay more, then it will be 5. Lincoln looked at Fury with a smile, as if the things that the big boss did had nothing to do with him. In fact, it really didn't matter much. If those scientists hadn't been beaten around, the big boss wouldn't have been able to stand up at all. Everything started from their own stupidity. What does it have to do with Lincoln? He is just an innocent ancestor who was damaged. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. You can also call me a motherland or an ancestor. Fury fell silent. Lincoln did not urge him. He just sat on the chair with his arms crossed and looked at Fury with interest. Either to save a group of people who were destined to die and pay a large sum of money and inestimable collection items for this, or to ignore the lives of these people and let Lincoln do whatever he wanted. At this time, the pressure has completely come to the American side. The people in the command center were in a difficult choice, but in fact it was not very difficult. After a slight estimate of the compensation required to pay the hostages controlled by the big boss, they made a decisive choice. The items equivalent to the value of 4 collections will be sent to you later. Now, take action to deal with him. Lincoln showed a mocking smile at the corner of his mouth and turned to walk out. I suggest that you better cut off the surveillance. Of course, this is just a suggestion. At first, they were still a little confused until they remembered Lincoln's previous brilliant record. They were shocked and hurried back to cut off the network communication of the entire Manhattan area. Look at you. How pitiful. Just like a tiny bug. The big boss laughed wildly in the air. He used his terrifying mental power unscrupulously to suppress everyone behind the bunker. The countless hostages under his control wandered around like puppets, blocking their sight and looking for more survivors. The combination of heart-shaped grass and super soldier serum greatly affected the nature of the big boss, and the tyranny factor that originally could be suppressed by reason was constantly amplified. Use wisdom to solve the enemy. No, no, no. He now has enough strength to bend steel, and wisdom has been forgotten by the big boss. Telepathy allows the big boss to obtain countless memories from the minds of many hostages, but he himself is also suffering the consequences of accepting thousands and tens of thousands of memories at once. Blood and corpses reflected in his pupils, constantly stimulating his spirit to become more excited. The divine light flashed in his yellow-green pupils, and the powerful mental power was almost like a real ripple rippling around him. The unrivaled pleasure was eroding his mind. Killing and control made him more violent. He manipulated everything he could see into painful shells whizzing away, and his palms were emitting gamma rays crazily. The big boss's eyes were full of wanton joy. I'm invincible. I'm invincible. Bang. Before the big boss finished speaking, the roar of boulders breaking made his words stop abruptly. The broken stones scattered in all directions like bullets, and the dust and fog dispersed, and Lincoln's figure appeared in front of the big boss. He walked slowly towards the big boss, and golden lines outlined a layer of outlines on his body. The matte black spread between the golden outlines, and finally turned into a black battle suit with gold lines. Lincoln tapped his feet lightly, as if he had escaped the comfort of gravity. His body rose up out of thin air, and finally stood in front of the big boss. Don't you remember me, Dr. Samuel? Samuel? No, I'm not. I'm not. The big boss roared wildly when he mentioned the personality that should have been erased at the beginning of the transformation. The anger of being poked at the pain point and the fear of Lincoln in his past were constantly intertwined in his heart, and finally made his thinking completely twisted and perverted. From extreme movement to extreme stillness, the crazy clown-like big boss suddenly calmed down. The memories of the many hostages gathered at this moment, and he finally thought of the description of Lincoln by the outside world. You are Superman. Lincoln smiled lightly. Superman, you can call me that, but Superman. Superman. Ha 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 ha. Superman. The big boss's wild laughter interrupted Lincoln, and he slammed his hand on the armrest of the throne. The terrifying mental ripples whistled down and completely enveloped the hostages he sat on. See, Superman, see. If you don't want them to die, kneel down. Kneel down, Superman. Threatening me with hostages? Hearing the threat from the big boss, Lincoln's eyes widened, and the smile on his face gradually became more and more unbridled. He even looked back at the temporary command center in the distance. Did you hear that? He actually threatened me with hostages. This is the first time. I didn't expect that someone would be stupid enough to threaten me with hostages. Ha 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 ha. Looking at Lincoln, who was laughing more like a villain than himself, the big boss was furious. He slightly closed his 5 fingers, and the head of a hostage controlled by mental power turned into a bomb and exploded with a bang. A flower of blood bloomed under his feet, and the big boss sneered, "See, Superman, if you don't kneel down, I will kill them all. Kill them all. No need, this is too troublesome." Lincoln glanced at the group of people who were destined to be hopeless below. His face turned cold, and a red beam of light instantly bloomed from his pupils. Like a scalpel, the high-temperature laser swept through the crowd in an instant. In just a short breath, the necks of the confused zombie-like crowd were cut by Lincoln. The sound of people falling to the ground rang out one after another. Fury and others who were watching from a distance were stunned by the heads rolling on the ground. The big boss of the villain widened his eyes in disbelief. How is it possible? How is it possible? Aren't you Superman? Why? Superman? The red in Lincoln's eyes dissipated. He tilted his head and moved his cervical vertebrae. Compared to the nickname Superman, Homelander or Ancestor is more suitable for me. Do you understand? Homelander Ancestor. The big boss seemed to be autistic and lowered his head to mutter to himself. But suddenly, he raised his head again, and the spiritual power ripples that had gradually dissipated instantly condensed in the air and rushed towards Lincoln like an iron wall. I don't care who you are. Die. Die. The terrifying spiritual power swept across like a chariot, and the glass curtain walls on both sides were shattered wherever it passed, and the airwaves even lifted the nearby bricks and stones. Like an unstoppable torrent, this attack that condensed all the power of the big boss hit Lincoln hard. Boom. The roaring explosion sounded, and the whistling shockwave swept dozens of meters away in an instant, and the dust was forcibly suppressed by this terrifying impact force. The sky was clear, and in the blue background, Lincoln's face was calm, as if the attack just now was just a gust of wind. The cloak behind him fluttered, and Lincoln's figure instantly crossed the space, and his 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and blasted out like black lightning. Boom. The airwave roared, and the mental barrier that the big boss had condensed in front of him was shattered and torn apart in an instant. The terrifying power instantly spread to his limbs and bones. Muscles were crushed, bones were compressed, and except for the huge head, even his remaining iron throne was torn apart. The pain was clear, and he fell from the air without controlling his mental power. Yellow-green blood continued to overflow from his mouth and nose. He raised his head with difficulty, and saw Lincoln falling from midair in front of him. Let me go. Let me go. Chapter 70 Great Harvest. Let you go? Lincoln glanced at him, slowly raised his foot, and placed it on his head. What use do you have that is worth me letting you go? Strong pressure came from Lincoln's feet. In just a moment, the big boss heard the groaning of his skull under the heavy burden. I'm smart. I can help you make things. Everything you want, I can make for you. But I don't want anything. Lincoln replied casually, adding another point of strength under his feet. Why don't you think about it again? Crack crack, the sound of the skull breaking echoed in the big boss's cochlea. The strong pressure made his mouth and nose bleed like a fountain. I can. You can what? Can't hear it. Lincoln asked loudly, pretending to be interested, but the strength under his feet continued to increase. In the big boss's pleading eyes, Lincoln shook his head in disappointment. What a pity. It seems that your desire to survive is not very strong. In this case, it seems that he knows that his death is approaching, and the pleading in the big boss's eyes has all turned into anger and resentment. But this can't stop Lincoln's foot from stepping down heavily. Bang. With a muffled sound, the tough skull of the big boss was completely shattered. A powerful force whistled out from Lincoln's feet, and in an instant, the fragile brain tissue underneath was turned into a pool of mud. With a calm face, Lincoln pulled his feet out of the pile of filth, and used the biological force field to drag his body into the air. Looking at the silent command center in the distance, FBI, come out to clean up the mess. Kill the hostages first, and then kill the robbers with a brutal posture. Lincoln once again shocked everyone, including Nick Fury, with his bloody and cold villain-like actions. Superman? Don't dream. Even the brutality of Homelander in the comics is not as good as Lincoln. Superman is easy to control. Homelander, who cares about family fame and fortune can also be controlled, but Lincoln used the corpses on the ground to tell everyone that he is not controllable. Manhattan Building. Thanks to Lincoln's deliberate indulgence, the building that was originally decorated a lot has been completely scrapped, but it's better to be scrapped. He now has better materials to build a better collection hall. He no longer needs the old one. It is just right for a second modification, turning this Manhattan building into the most extravagant entertainment venue in Manhattan. A 95-story entertainment venue located in the heart of Manhattan. This should be able to break many records, right? Lincoln casually took out 3 holographic imaging devices and put them away. He was too lazy to put the real stuff on the counter. His new collection hall is not ready yet, so there is no need to rush to use the real thing. Moreover, the progress of the golden string has increased a lot. It should not be long before the next time he can cross, so he can just use 3 holographic projections to fool around. Outside, Lincoln left, but things were far from over. Those diligent staff began to clean the floor, and in the command center behind, the group of people who had just solved the crisis of the big boss with Lincoln's hand started again. What? We have to use it from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s inventory? I absolutely disagree. Fury stood in front of the screen, his face as black as a plastic garbage bag, and directly rejected the proposal of the US government representative. S.H.I.E.L.D. is S.H.I.E.L.D., the agency is the agency, the military is the military, and the US government is the US government. These must not be confused. Yes, we agree with Director Fury on this point. Without waiting for the US government representative to speak, the others nodded. The purpose of establishing the agency in S.H.I.E.L.D. is to solve the troubles related to Mr. Lincoln, and the other is to solve global crisis events. Here, we need to remind the US representative that the place where the big boss appeared is Earth, North America, United States, New York State, New York City, Manhattan, which is under the jurisdiction of the US government. The scientific researchers in the Manhattan building are also all staff members of the agency US component. Strictly speaking, this time is simply a crisis event in the United States and has nothing to do with S.H.I.E.L.D. in the agency. We protest the US government's practice of asking the people of the world to pay for its own crisis events unless you agree to open the body of the big boss for joint research. Hearing this, the US representative fell silent. He never mentioned that the big boss wanted to steal the body, but he was still picked up. If possible, he was willing to pay for the equivalent of 4 items in exchange for the absolute ownership of the big boss's body, but after knowing the level of the collection, the muffled sound broke. Erskine's version of the super soldier serum, the heart-shaped grass with the same effect as a serum, and Hulk's almighty cells, any one of them is ridiculously valuable. Adding Lincoln's reward for one shot, a full 4 items. Even if the United States is big and powerful, it is enough to empty it all at once. Look at S.H.I.E.L.D., which has research bases all over the world, and there are only a few special items 084 stored in its warehouses, and they are all under the supervision of the World Security Council. Before, they might have been able to quietly take out 2 of them, but now it's no longer possible. Everyone wants the big boss's body for research, and they keep a close eye on things like 084. The United States will either be emptied, or can only learn to share. Everyone stared at the US representative, silently waiting for him to give in. 4 collections in exchange for a corpse of a big boss who might not be able to reveal anything. Even if the corpse contained many secrets, the United States would only do so. Everyone was sure that the American representative would agree to their request. The next thing to do was to select the right things and give them to Lincoln as compensation. The disputes and transactions between these people had nothing to do with Lincoln. He only cared about how many new collections he got in the end. The first item was a ring engraved with a blue circle-shaped gem. It could drive the airflow to form a high-speed rotating vortex. Its power was limited, but if 9 more rings with special abilities could be found, it might be a good collection. The second item was a palm-sized sculpture that looked like it was made of yellow sand. In addition to having an excellent energy reaction and an appearance similar to that of an ancient Egyptian god, humans could not find anything from it. Lincoln saw that there was a god sealed in this thing. Thinking of Moonlight Night, he gladly accepted the collection. The third item was a silver-white anti-gravity element with a diameter of only about 5 mm, the gravity hammer. This amount is very small, but considering that, even if the entire earth is squeezed dry, it is not certain that much gravity hammer can be extracted, Lincoln accepted it for the time being. There is not much else in this world, but there are enough planets. Just squeeze a little more when the time comes. The fourth item is a dagger inlaid with blood-colored gems. Lincoln felt the power of magic on it. This thing is not from the earth, but from hell. Anyway, he accepts everything. Those people were a little clever. The things they sent were either more symbolic than practical, or they were things they could not understand at all. But Lincoln didn't care. Anyway, it was free, so why not refuse it? With the death of a big boss, his collection suddenly expanded from 4 items to 8 items. Isn't it wonderful? Chapter 71 Lincoln. The renovation of the Manhattan building will take some time, but considering that his golden string has been charged for the most part, Lincoln doesn't care about it. Thanks to the impact of the big boss incident, the people in the firm have withdrawn the people who were placed around Lincoln, either openly or secretly. It was because of their indirect intervention that the disabled big boss escaped successfully, causing them to suffer heavy losses. Now, they don't want to cause such an incident again. As time passed, Lincoln's power was growing day by day, and the last gray on the golden string was finally completely dyed into gold. With a thought, the world in front of Lincoln shook again. Lincoln's disappearance made the people in the firm a little confused, but it was only a short moment, and they no longer paid attention. It was unrealistic to expect them to keep an eye on a Superman, whose speed was comparable to teleportation. They just hoped that there would be no new crisis incidents. On the sofa, the gold in front of Lincoln's eyes began to fade gradually, and a sound mixed with some electric sound came from in front of him. Camp Crystal Lake has reopened. We have prepared complete tourist facilities and safety protection measures. Welcome everyone to visit. Smith's Grove Mental Hospital reminds the public that a mental patient has escaped from the hospital recently. If you find the whereabouts of the patient, please call Smith's Grove Mental Hospital. The characteristics of the escaped patient are as follows. News from Springwood Town. After renovation, Badham Kindergarten will reopen soon. Let us wish the children a happy year in it, and no longer be troubled by nightmares. Town Express store reports that we have reached a cooperative relationship with Sawyer Farm and Gideon Meat Processing Plant. They will provide the freshest meat ingredients for the residents of Springwood Town. Welcome everyone to come and buy. A shocking incident. The father wanted to kill his daughter with a gun. Thanks to the patrolman's dedication to his duties, the tragedy did not happen. Let us welcome the upcoming new residents. There will be no people wearing devil skins here. Lincoln. The broadcast element was so excessive that Lincoln didn't know where to complain for a while. And why did he appear in someone else's house this time? Could it be that Jin Zion felt that his life was too dull and wanted him to be wanted for trespassing? Lincoln was hesitating when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned his head and saw a good-looking blonde woman walking down the stairs. At the fence on the second floor, Lincoln saw a cute lolly with long black hair and a cold face, Emma. In an instant, Lincoln understood his situation, but he did not feel any urgency. Instead, he looked at Angela, a woman with a superior figure, and thought in his heart, is Angela's figure and face so good in the movie? I don't remember, right? Has the world been corrected? After pondering for a moment, thinking of the news in the broadcast, Lincoln nodded in his heart. Yes, it has been corrected. He was silent, and Angela, with a classic blonde and big waves, had walked up to Lincoln. Thank you so much. If it weren't for your help, I don't know how long it would take to clean up everything. Lincoln, when did I help you? Why didn't I know? Lincoln was full of doubts in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He said righteously, it's my duty. My morals do not allow me to sit idly by and watch a mother with a child fall into trouble without helping. Mother? No, you misunderstood. Angela looked back and saw Emma standing upstairs. Her face almost changed, showing sadness and worry. She is my niece, and I haven't married yet. That's great. What I mean is, this beautiful lady, I wonder if you can treat you to dinner tonight, and you can bring your lovely niece. No. Angela shook her head, looking at Lincoln's face, that showed a hint of disappointment at the right time. She suddenly laughed again. I should treat you. As she spoke, she left her phone number to Lincoln and smiled slightly. "See you tonight." Lincoln took the phone number and nodded to Angela. "See you tonight." Upstairs, watching Lincoln's back going away, Emma's face became colder. She hated Lincoln, a guy who looked wrong, especially when she could enjoy all the favors of her Aunt Angela by virtue of her status. Lincoln's appearance broke all her plans. With her lips tightly pursed, she looked at Lincoln, who walked out of the door and suddenly turned back to wave at her. She felt that maybe she should find her chance to kill this hateful obstacle. After leaving Angela's house, Lincoln spent an afternoon walking around outside and then found that this world was really awesome. The people living in this world were comparable to the people in New York City, which was full of disasters, and the people here were global, which was great. Time flew by, and when Lincoln didn't make any mess, the sun and time in this world were still normal. In an interesting Western restaurant, Lincoln and Angela enjoyed a very good dinner. The steak tasted good, and the red wine tasted good. Perhaps because of her poor alcohol tolerance, Angela's face flushed after taking a sip of red wine, so she had to be supported by Lincoln to go home. He helped her into the house, into the room, onto the bed, undressed her, and sat her up. Sure enough, the description of big blonde waves was correct. It was really big blonde waves. Angela, who didn't want to go to bed early, had a wonderful night with Lincoln's help. She experienced something she had never experienced before in her life, so crazy and fascinated. In the children's room on the second floor, Emma, who was supposed to close her eyes and sleep, opened her eyes. She walked out of the room quietly and stood quietly in front of the door that kept making all kinds of strange noises. Her eyes were cold, as if she saw the enemy who killed her father in the metal. On the bed in the room, Lincoln, who was suppressed and unable to move, quietly experienced the goodness of the young woman. His eyes with perspective easily saw through the door. Looking at Emma, whose eyes were full of coldness but helpless, Lincoln couldn't help but smile. What could be more exciting than talking about life with her aunt at the home of the bad seed Emma? Discuss life with bad seed Emma's aunt at her home, and let bad seed Emma listen to her aunt's debate about life outside the door. Chapter 72. Fuck. What is that? Angela was so weak after a night of discussion that she couldn't even get up to make breakfast for Emma. Fortunately, Emma was sensible and could prepare breakfast for herself without her care. At the dining table, Emma calmly finished her breakfast. After tidying up the table, she stood up and walked to Angela's door. After a moment of silence, she reached out and knocked on Angela's door. Dang, dang, dang. The crisp sound came, but it didn't make the sleepy Angela react. Instead, Lincoln got up and put on his clothes. With a creak, the door opened. In Emma's eyes, that were filled with resentment, Lincoln stood in front of her like a wall, separating her from the door. "What can I do for you? Your aunt is very sleepy. Maybe you can talk to me." Emma looked up at Lincoln, her eyes full of coldness. "This is my home. Get out of here." "Impossible." Lincoln closed the door and looked down at Emma, then picked her up and took her downstairs. "You don't know how great your aunt's skills are. Chatting with her is simply a pleasure." The absolute advantage brought by Lincoln's body suppressed Emma from making any other moves. She could only be thrown onto the sofa on the first floor by Lincoln. "I'll tell my aunt." Lincoln looked at her with a perverted look that matched Emma's impression and then said grimly, "Although you look good, you're too young. I'm going to wait until you grow up before I take action. I think you might be able to directly sue me for other more serious crimes at that time. What do you think, Emma?" Lincoln's answer was beyond Emma's expectation. Not only did he not panic or make excuses, but he showed a very high level of perversion. This made Emma's emotions a little incoherent, but after a few breaths of silence, she finally came to her senses and screamed, "Help." She shouted while getting up from the sofa and running towards the stairs. The small leather shoes made a thumping sound on the floor, and the high decibel screams echoed in the room, but there was no movement upstairs, as if Angela didn't hear Emma's screams at all. Looking at Emma, who was about to run to the stairs, Lincoln grabbed Emma's collar casually and led her into the study, like holding a doll. With a bang, Lincoln closed the door tightly and pulled the curtains. In a dark environment, he looked at Emma silently, with a sneer on his lips. "Emma, you don't want the police to find out about your murder, do you, Emma?" Emma, who was still young, had not yet learned the classic sayings of the country across the ocean, but this did not prevent her from understanding what Lincoln meant. In just a moment, her face darkened, no longer like a child, but a cold executioner. "What are you talking about? The little boy who took your medal, the nanny who died in the fire, the teacher who was stung by a bee, and the father who was killed by the patrolman." Lincoln stopped and looked at Emma, whose face was no longer calm, with a smile on his face. "Dear little Emma, you don't want your murder to be exposed, right?" Lincoln casually revealed one secret after another, and Emma's mood was no longer the same as before. She breathed rapidly, and her beautiful eyes stared at Lincoln. She was so murderous that she couldn't help but glance at the sharp pen on the table. But the next moment, Lincoln's face suddenly approached, as if a ghost suddenly appeared in front of her, scaring Emma. "Do you want to kill me? Risking the fact of murder being exposed? TSK. Maybe I should explain to you what a scheduled email is." "You." Emma understood what Lincoln meant, and gritted her teeth in anger. "What are you going to do?" "I want you to be obedient." Lincoln rubbed Emma's head, messing up her hair, that she had carefully groomed in the morning, and said, "Be a good 9-year-old baby. At least this way you won't be sent to a juvenile detention center. It will not be easy for a beautiful little girl like you to be put in a juvenile detention center, right? Maybe they will shave your hair, scratch your face, and take off your clothes. That would be really miserable." Lincoln didn't know what an American juvenile detention center looked like, but don't worry, because Emma didn't know either, so the threat in his words was fully heard by Emma. A kind who knew everything about her, and even had evidence of her murder suddenly intervened in her life. Emma was in a very bad mood at this time. She wanted to bite Lincoln to death, but she couldn't do that now, at least not before she was sure that she would not be arrested. Therefore, even though she was full of resentment in her heart, she could only stare at Lincoln and curse helplessly. "You devil. I curse you to hell." "Devil? I can't remember how many times you have said that to me." Lincoln picked his ears indifferently, his face full of indifference. "Although it's redundant, I think the devil is still a small witch compared to me. Maybe you should think of some more unique curses." As he said that, he stood up again, opened the door of the study and walked out, and at the end he didn't forget to give Emma a word of advice. "Please prepare lunch for today. Angela is good at cooking. I plan to spend half a day discussing life with her. By the way, does your aunt wear gloves when cooking? Or, does she give you a good morning kiss after getting up?" Leaving Emma, who was already dazed, Lincoln slammed the door of the study. 3, 2, 1. "Ah." The expected scream sounded in the study, and Lincoln's face immediately showed an expression of "I feel comfortable," humming a happy tune as he walked towards Angela's room. Lincoln dared to guarantee that Emma would definitely solve lunch at noon today instead of bothering Angela, and maybe add an extra dinner. In addition, the good morning kiss when getting up, and the good night kiss when coaxing to sleep, should also be directly cancelled in the future. Emma may be disgusted for a long time, which is very happy. Lincoln is not only good at solving hostage crises, but also has a deep say in things like being a pervert, talking with her aunt at night, threatening Emma with classic island sentences, and disgusting her with words at the end. Anyone with a bit of moral integrity would not do such a thing, but Lincoln, as her ancestor, did it without any pressure. Emma, a precocious child, killed 4 people including her own father at the age of 9. Compared with this, what Lincoln did was nothing. Chapter 73 Camping Plan. Angela was skilled, and did her job very well. She was very precise, and did not give Lincoln any room to retreat. In the study, Emma, who was disgusted, felt her chest rise and fall. When she heard the faint sound coming from upstairs, she felt her chest was stuffy and angry. Time flew by. After a wonderful morning, Angela, who had escaped from her original sin, finally remembered that she had a niece. She hurriedly got up from the bed, washed up in a hurry, and went to the kitchen downstairs. Then she saw Emma sitting at the table and enjoying lunch calmly. The ingredients were very simple. Some things found in the refrigerator were put together, which made Angela feel very guilty. Looking at Emma, who looked calm and very sensible, Angela felt guilty. She held Emma in her arms with an apologetic look on her face, and then kissed her on the face and Emma's eyes. "I'm very sorry, dear. There won't be a next time, I promise." On the side, leaning on the stairs, and looking at Emma who couldn't refuse Angela's kiss, Lincoln thought of what he said to Emma in the morning, and touched his chin, and couldn't help laughing. Angela, who had a nodding acquaintance with Lincoln, had washed herself, but this did not prevent Emma, who had a slight misophobia, from feeling disgusted with Angela's kiss, especially when Lincoln deliberately disgusted her before. As a good baby who was only 9 years old, Emma certainly would not show disgust in front of her aunt, but when hugging Angela, she released all the malice to Lincoln with her eyes and face without covering up. This certainly did not cause any pressure to Lincoln, but made him happier. Although it was very shameless to do so, what could be more enjoyable than bullying a little girl? No. At least not yet. Obviously, a simple kiss to Emma could not completely dispel Angela's guilt. So, after a silence, Angela proposed a decision that Lincoln had never thought of before. Let's go camping. I remember the radio mentioned that there is a new Crystal Lake camp nearby. Maybe we can go there to spend a pleasant weekend. What do you think, Emma? Angela thought that her Crystal Lake vacation plan was excellent, but Lincoln standing behind her had fallen silent. He had wandered around Springwood town yesterday, and he was very sure that the Crystal Lake camp that Angela mentioned now was the Crystal Lake camp where the famous 100-man killer boy was located. So the Crystal Lake camp vacation project that Angela was talking about now should be renamed. The name of a 2-day and 1-night close contact with the 100-man killer boy is very good. At least it is more attractive than the Crystal Lake camp vacation plan. Unfortunately, the name cannot be changed because Angela has no idea that under the seemingly peaceful Crystal Lake is a simple-minded boy obsessed with hockey masks. Emma didn't think Crystal Lake campground was fun, but Lincoln had the upper hand, so she had no room to refuse and could only nod against her will. After getting Emma's consent, Angela's face suddenly showed a trace of joy. After kissing Emma again in the awkward look, she turned around and began to pack her luggage to prepare for the happy vacation plan. Watching Angela's back disappear, Emma's smiling face, which was still calm and peaceful a moment ago, immediately collapsed and looked at Lincoln. Childish camping plan. Oh, yes, yes. Lincoln did not refute, but looked at Emma with a smirk. I sincerely hope that when we stay at Crystal Lake campground tonight, you can still say this is childish. Looking at Lincoln's smile, Emma subconsciously felt that something was wrong, but how could she know that there was a simple-minded boy who killed hundreds of people hidden in Crystal Lake? After all, she was just a weak, pitiful and helpless child. Since the name of Elm Street was erased from Springwood by the adults and Badham Kindergarten was renovated, life in the town has become much calmer than before. Many people thought that the devil wandering and nightmares had disappeared, provided that no one remembered Elm Street and no one knew the name Freddy. Freddy, whose name was forgotten, fell into a state of weakening. Without the fear of humans as the source of his power, he was no longer worthy of the title of Nightmare. However, all this ceased to exist after Lincoln arrived. Compared with his strong physical body and super physical resistance, Superman is not strong in spirit and magic resistance, but this is relative. The magic resistance of normal life may be only slightly lower than that of physical resistance. That is, physical resistance is 100 and magic resistance is 20. Superman is different. Superman's magic resistance may be only 1% of physical resistance. However, considering the physical resistance that is strong enough to withstand a nuclear explosion, even 1% of magic resistance is enough to despise all living beings, and the same is true for the spirit. The mental power of the entire town of Springwood cannot be compared with the mental power of Lincoln alone. When Lincoln came to this world and appeared in Springwood town with the name Freddy, the weak Freddy had already recovered from his weak state. Even without fear as the source of power, Freddy at this time was enough to drag people into endless nightmares and torture them. He had been wandering in the dream, just waiting for the night to come to find a suitable prey to bring him into the nightmare and torture him. He naturally locked his eyes on Lincoln and Angela Remmer beside him, but as the three drove away from Springwood town and drove towards Crystal Lake, Freddy in the dream withdrew his attention and disappointment. He has not yet recovered to his peak moment. Compared with leaving Springwood town to torture living beings in the distance, he chose to spread fear in this town that once sealed him, so that those damned humans could taste the wrath of the ghost. In the passenger seat, feeling the malice belonging to Fred gradually recede, Lincoln couldn't help but look back in the direction of Springwood Town behind him. What a coward. I was thinking of luring you over to fight Jason. Lincoln's mumbling caught Angela's attention. She looked at Lincoln in surprise. What's wrong? Is there any problem? No problem. Lincoln shook his head. I just thought that Crystal Lake should be suitable for barbecue. Did you bring the barbecue rack and ingredients? Angela blinked, a little confused. You can barbecue? Too bad, I can't, so I didn't bring it. But don't worry, maybe we can buy some from Gideon Meat Processing Factory later. I remember that it is not far from Crystal Lake. It only takes more than 10 minutes to drive there. Lincoln was silent again. Thank you for the 100 points rewarded by riding a donkey and fighting an elephant. Chapter 74 Gideon Meat Processing Plant. Lincoln wanted to ask how Angela could survive in this dangerous world. The town they settled in was Springwood, where Nightmare Freddy was. They made a camping plan that led to Crystal Lake, where the innocent boy Jason was. They even chose to sell food in a dangerous place like the Gideon Processing Plant. People in this world may not understand it, but Lincoln knew exactly what this place was. The first thing to mention is Sawyer Farm, where the raw materials for the Gideon Meat Processing Plant came from. This farm is controlled by the Sawyer family. There are many family members, but the most well-known one should be the chainsaw killer Babu Sawyer, who is nicknamed Leatherface. This unlucky kid likes to find some lone passengers on the road and cut the skin from their faces to make masks for himself. As for the remaining meat, some of it was digested by other perverted members of the Sawyer family, but the whereabouts of some of it are self-evident. Next is the Gideon Meat Processing Plant. The pork in this plant is generally real pork, but the one who is in charge of this plant is a woman named Amanda. Yes, it was Amanda who passed the test of Jigsaw and turned into a new Jigsaw, leaving no chance for the person being tested to survive. To some extent, the ability of those horror movie characters to commit suicide is nothing compared to Angela. Look at her. In just a few steps, she has linked herself to 4 perverted killers. If Lincoln is included, that's 5. With this ability, Lincoln is willing to call her a true horror movie protagonist. Oh, I forgot, Emma, who was only 9 years old and killed 4 people in the back seat, is also 1. That's 6. Angela didn't know where Lincoln's silence came from. She wanted to ask, but after looking at the road ahead, she chose to keep her mouth shut. Halloween is approaching. Although there is still some time, Springwood Town has already become lively in advance. Various decorations have been set up everywhere on the streets, and children have begun to play and laugh in the town, which makes Angela's driving extremely difficult. It was not until they left Springwood Town and walked onto a sparsely populated rural road that she could not help but breathe a sigh of relief and looked at Lincoln. What's wrong? I see that you look unhappy. Nothing, I just thought of something. Beep beep. Before Lincoln finished speaking, a shrill whistle sounded from behind the car. He looked back and saw a van carrying 6 people. Through the car window, he could clearly see the 2 young men laughing in the main and co-pilot seats. They seemed happy with their actions. Lincoln's eyes narrowed, but suddenly, he saw the map on the front desk of the van and the luggage in the car. The luggage was normal, and the map was also normal, provided that the lake circled in red on the map was ignored. Crystal Lake. All of a sudden, the anger brewing in Lincoln's heart disappeared. Lincoln, Angela and others went to Crystal Lake to camp because of his Superman. As for the people in the van, they went to brush up their records for Jason. Compared to hammering a few people to death on the road, Lincoln thought it would not be a bad idea to let them see Jason and learn about the complete list of human death. Thinking of this, he turned the steering wheel and made way for the people in the van behind him to leave a high-speed death passage leading to Crystal Lake. Lincoln's temporary concession made the people in the van laugh even more happily. After giving a middle finger, they stepped on the accelerator and disappeared at the end of the road with a roar. Watching the van's license plate gradually go away, Lincoln pondered for a moment and picked up the map. Do you want to stay in Crystal Lake first? I can go to Gideon's processing plant to buy meat by myself. Can you? Angela was a little skeptical. I remember you don't seem to have a driver's license, but I have money. For the sake of money, the rural police may not care so much about me. Lincoln shrugged and looked at the back seat again. And Emma should want to stay with you, right Emma? Emma glanced at Lincoln coldly and nodded. Yes. Lincoln's persuasion and Emma made Angela finally give up the idea of going to Gideon's processing plant to buy ingredients, and instead handed the car keys to Lincoln. Be careful. Don't worry. Lincoln smiled and looked into the depths of Crystal Lake. There, a wooden house that looked like it had been there for who knows how many years was quietly located in the woods. Some things could be seen behind the rotten door. Lincoln didn't know why the things in the wooden house were not cleaned up, but he knew that it only took an opportunity for Jason, who had been silent for many years, to come back to the arena. Before this, Crystal Lake would not be very dangerous. After sending Angela and the others to the camp to stay, Lincoln stepped on the accelerator and rushed to the Gideon meat processing plant. The car was moving very slowly, but it was not a waste of time to get some sun. Inside the Gideon meat processing plant, the above ground part was a regular meat processing plant, but underground, unknown to all outsiders, there was a basement that could only be entered from other entrances. It was unknown when this basement under the processing plant was built, but now, a test, the ultimate test, was about to take place here. John Kramer, who was good at mechanical manufacturing, created a survival game when his life was in the countdown and began to select suitable people to play the game. Over the years, his game has killed many people and saved many people. Some people understood the true meaning of life from it. Some people hated him because of the harm caused by the game, and some people put on black robes and chose to become John's disciples. John has many disciples, almost all of whom are survivors of a certain game, but none of them are Jigsaw. The real Jigsaw is still the only one so far. Most people misunderstood his game and were on the wrong path from the beginning. He thought Amanda might be on the right path, but the process and results of many games told him that Amanda had deviated a little. He was not going to educate Amanda with words, because the games time and time again had fully proved that only action was the best measure. The basement of this meat processing plant would be his burial place and the place of the ultimate test. Here, not only those who were selected and brought in would be tested, but also Amanda and even himself. John planned everything perfectly until a car stopped at the door of Gideon meat processing plant. Chapter 75. I want to play a game with you. The entrance to the basement is hidden, but it doesn't matter. There are no roads in the world, but as long as Lincoln wants, he can make a road anywhere. The blazing heat rays hit the concrete layer straight, and the hot lava fell from a high place. This huge movement instantly attracted Amanda's attention. The surveillance camera can't see the ceiling, but it can clearly see Lincoln falling from a high place. Horrified, Amanda subconsciously reached out to grab the pistol on the workbench, but the next moment, a calm voice came from behind. If I were you, I wouldn't reach out to touch that gun. When? Question mark? Amanda's pupils dilated with fear in her heart. She held the gun in both hands, turned around and leaned against the workbench, looking at Lincoln with suspicion in her eyes. Who are you? Who am I? Lincoln glanced at the surveillance screen behind her. Didn't you see it just now? Impossible. Amanda shook her head subconsciously. That's Area D. It's impossible for someone to come here immediately from such a far place. Really? Then just treat me as if I'm not a human. Lincoln smiled slightly, ignoring the black muzzle of the gun in Amanda's hand, and turned to look at the door of the studio. Through the transparent plastic cloth, Lincoln could clearly see Jigsaw lying on the bed due to advanced cancer. I want to play a game with you. Dream on. Amanda moved her steps, her eyes full of vigilance. I won't play any games with you. Lincoln ignored her, just picked up a timer from the table and said calmly, walking towards the plastic curtain door, Amanda, as John's disciple, you should have practiced his ideas and pass them on, but just like you like holding that pistol, you always choose to leave the most deadly killing intent to the chosen one. Now, it's your turn to make a choice. Lincoln put the timer set to 90 seconds on the table, which is Amanda's favorite time to set. I'm the chosen one. Now, you can choose to keep the muzzle of the gun representing the killing intent pointed at me and then pull the trigger, or put down the muzzle and leave room for survival. Amanda, you don't have much time. Lincoln's calm voice fell, and the next moment, the bright red timer began to count down. Tick tick tick. The crisp sound was as clear as a bell. Looking at the countdown that was constantly decreasing, Amanda finally felt the long lost pressure again. Even if the heavy pistol was in her hand at this time, it could not bring her the slightest sense of security. Fuck you. In the ward. The abnormal sound in the studio attracted the attention of Dr. Lyon, who was maintaining John's vitality. She hesitated and wanted to walk towards the studio, but John's weak voice stopped her. You need to maintain my life, not to help Amanda. But, Lyon hesitated, but was greeted by John's calm eyes. You need to remember your duties, doctor. In the studio. Fuck you. Amanda stared at Lincoln closely. The surveillance images that kept flashing back in her mind and the indifference on Lincoln's face gave her great pressure. She tried to look at John in the ward, but the small piece of plastic partition had already been blocked by Lincoln's body. Lincoln glanced at the countdown that was constantly decreasing, and did not speak, but quietly spread the biological force field to surround the pistol in Amanda's hand. The muzzle, the chamber, the barrel, more and more parts were covered by the BO force field, until finally, only the last area was left. The ticking of the timer made her heart beat faster and faster, and finally, she made a choice. Bang! The index finger pulled the trigger, the hammer ignited the primer, and the bullet flame exploded in the narrow barrel, but the next moment it was not released from the right position. The suppression of the BO force field greatly increased the damage of the gunpowder explosion. In Amanda's horrified eyes, the gun body was torn apart from the back. The pressure of the flame explosion gushed out from the crack and hit her face straight. The scorching temperature and the impact of a heavy punch almost made Amanda faint. Her palms and face were torn open, and blood could not stop flowing out of them. With a look of fear on her face, Amanda looked up, and found that Lincoln had leisurely stopped the countdown of the timer. What a pity, Amanda. Game over. Snap snap. It was like the sound of a broken mirror, illusory at first, and then becoming more and more solid. Wiping off the bloodstains in front of her eyes, Amanda looked at the world in front of her in horror. The air was filled with cracks made up of pieces of broken lenses. The originally vivid world seemed to be cut off in her eyes. She subconsciously rushed towards Lincoln, but the sudden impact made her stop. Slapping the invisible barrier formed by the cracks of the lenses, Amanda's eyes were full of fear. What is this? What is this? This is your punishment, Amanda. Lincoln looked at her calmly. His face was indifferent and calm, and his voice was extremely ethereal. You failed the test, so it's impossible for you to give up your killing intent. Therefore, you need to bear the price of bloodlust alone in this space, until you walk the same path as those who were maliciously killed by you in the name of the test. No, you can't do this. Amanda was terrified. She slapped the barrier that separated the mirror space from the real space more and more frantically. You are not qualified to do this. Lincoln didn't say anything, but turned and left. Repent alone, Amanda. In this world without mages, the barrier between the mirror space and the real space is so great that it makes people despair. Hula. Reaching out to push aside the plastic roller shutter, Lincoln walked into the ward under Lyon's vigilant and suspicious eyes. He first glanced at Lyon, who was standing in the corner at a loss, and then looked at John, who was lying on the bed and had basically lost his ability to move. Hello, John Kramer. John looked at Lincoln with difficulty, and his eyes were calm and could not stir up the slightest ripple. You killed Amanda. She killed herself. Her test failed. Lincoln looked at John calmly and reached out to take out a recorder from John's hand hidden under the bedsheet. Your perfect plan is no longer needed. Now, I want to play a game with you. Maybe my current state is not suitable for playing a game with you. John lowered his eyes and breathed. I'm about to die. Yes, so I want to play a game with you. Lincoln smiled. He reached out and took a bottle of saline from the side and then dripped a few drops of azure liquid into it. While Lyon was hesitant to speak, Lincoln pierced the needle into John's body and transported the saline diluted with the improved serum into his body. John, now, our game begins. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.